All right. Hey, everybody. And hello. This is Zakia Sankar Jabbar, and welcome to my podcast, Real Talk with ZSJ, where you will get uncensored truth telling on this channel. And I am so excited to welcome my friend Alison McDowell. Alison is a mother and an independent researcher. I believe she got her start in activism and organizing, pushing back on school closures in Philadelphia, public schools in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we certainly connect at that level. For those of you who know me, you know that's my day job, education, advocacy, and organizing. And Alison and I connected maybe just a couple of months ago, and I came across, I believe, your blog, Wrenching the Gears, and it blew me away, right? And I believe the universe, provides. I believe the universe connects people. And I believe that you and I were connected for a very special reason, because my spidey senses have been tingling all year long. Let me tell you, okay? And usually, when my spidey senses are tingling, I listen. I like to listen to my intuition. I believe that common sense is in, listening to your intuition and trusting your gut and trusting yourself is something that we need to get back to as a society, I believe, and stop allowing people to basically socialize us out of thinking or trusting ourselves. So anyway, I wanted to kind of frame that up for this conversation that we're going to have today, because I know for a fact it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be a lot of information. It was extremely overwhelming. Your blog is extremely overwhelming. And for my audience, like Alison has been so graceful. She and I have had a couple of conversations where we've been on the phone for 2.5, 3 hours, just talking, like trying to make these connections and everything. Anyway, I need to shut up because you all came here to hear her. And Alison, I just want to bring you up. But first, I just wanted to share, because I know that most of my audience are Black folks, Black nationalists, Pan-Africanists, Black Marxists, Black socialists. And Alison is a white sister ally, right? And so I just want to let people know that I want to remind you all of this famous quote by our dear ancestor, Malcolm X. He says, "I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it's for or against." And I wanted to set that up and frame this before we get started on this conversation. So please like this video, please share it, and subscribe to this channel. Alison, please introduce yourself to this audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we hop into the presentation.
Oh, I'm very moved. I've been trying to find this audience. And it's very gracious of you to include me in this space. Like, as you had mentioned, my early, I'm kind of late to the activism game. I mean, I'm not someone who was raised up in this. I grew up in corporate suburbia. I was always doing, what was expected. So I'm catching up in a lot of ways, but I've spent my adult life in Philadelphia, and where I'm in an amazing city. I came loving all the wrong things about Philadelphia. I have a graduate degree in historic preservation and cultural landscape. And so my synthesis, that's how I think some of the skills that I bring to this is that I'm almost pulling together a landscape and looking at the terrain. And a lot of, people have told me that it's like I'm an advanced scout, someone who's out ahead saying oh, over here,
yeah.
That's sort of my skill set. And I'm not here to tell anyone in your community what should be done, right? I think at this point, people need to have an understanding of the landscape that we're operating in and how it's changing. And I can give you a really good intelligence briefing, because a lot of the things that are unfolding are happening in Philadelphia. It's a test bed. It's a Black city. It is a very poor city. And we're surrounded by a lot of wealth. And we have the University of Pennsylvania and Wharton Business School. So a lot of these innovative financial instruments are actually being developed here in our city, and we're being trialed as a test bed for this social impact economy is what they've called it. So we're this sort of opportune space where we have the technical expertise and the will of very affluent people, and there's a great wealth inequality in the city, and that's what we're navigating. And so there are things that I've looked at the big picture level, and then I realize, oh, actually it's happening here. It's happening with our housing authority. It's happening with our school system. And my entry point was through the public schools, and initially around school closures in 2013. Boston Consulting Group came, and they were using the test scores. And so I was like, and then they were putting schools up that had been destabilized and going to grade them and do things to them that I felt were unfair. And so I very naively, because I'm on quite a steep learning curve, I was like, well, they just don't maybe know how wrong it is the things that they're doing. And then I realized, no, it was all broken on purpose. And
down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm like, oh no, it's not that you don't know that it's broken. And then eventually, so I fought the standardized testing, but then realized eventually that it was really about educational technology as a profit center, like using kids to profit not only from software and hardware, but also through predictive profiling. Because one of the funders who was advancing a lot of these sort of disruptive policies was the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. And at the time, again, very naive, I'm like, oh, you want to sell your computers, right? Like, that's not fair. And then I realized that, oh no, like Dell, one of their primary clients is the NSA. Right. So you're like, wow. Oh, you're a surveillance. And I didn't even know that till I was watching Snowden, the movie, and he was throwing down his credentials to sort of justify that he was legit as an informant. And he threw down his Dell credential. So most of the stuff that Snowden actually pulled out was as a Dell employee to the NSA. He was a
Can you remind the audience who you mean by Snowden?
Oh, Edward Snowden. He was a contract employee to the NSA, and he gathered up a lot of information about the government spying on citizens, and then released it through largely the Intercept.
He's a political prisoner right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's out of the country, but yeah, he's
right.
Facing, legal action. So so then it was like, wow, so this is actually about a surveillance state, and our schools were handed over to the school email accounts to Google, even though they say philasd.org, they're Google accounts. And I kept telling teachers, like, well, one, there's sort of child labor and intellectual property attached to that. But if you're looking at data mining and predictive analytics, like Google's wealth in artificial intelligence is largely on their data sets. And so now all of our Google classrooms are creating vast amounts of data to help them refine their algorithms and their value for their company, as well as potential surveillance, of kids and teachers. So that's sort of my framework. I did education for a while, and then the reality is that the teachers are really stressed. This was, clearly pre-pandemic when we were still having regular school. My child went all 13 years through the public school district of Philadelphia. And, and I will say they were in a magnet school for much of that time. And so again, we were sheltered in these harms. And I later joined school council, and I was trying to leverage like the social capital of our school on behalf of other schools in the district. And I just saw the level of disparity and how different kids were treated even within the public system. So there's really big structural problems.
Right.
So,
well, I've got the slideshow pulled up.
Yeah.
If you want to start going.
So I will start off. So fracking our children. So here. So I'm gonna have to sort of click back and forth. So okay. So this is sort of my opening statement, and I want to say that. We're all in this machine. I kind of frame it as a machine because right now everything is so partisan and people are so fragmented that ultimately we are all up against this thing that I'm talking about here. And so I think we're all in different parts of it. So this is not to say that even though you're in the machine that you can't know what's happening and know the bigger picture, and that we can't all figure out ways within where we're situated in this machine to figure out ways to achieve more just outcomes, for all the kids, but especially the kids that have been harmed, for generations, really. So just to situate this, we are currently approaching what's known as the fourth industrial revolution. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so this is actually a shift. And if we understand that education from the beginning has always been about feeding children into industry. Mm-hmm. Right. So there was this shift from agriculture into industrial. So they would train the kids just enough to run the mechanized machines. And then eventually we shift to, service work or knowledge work. And then that became offshored. And this is all linked to globalization, because clearly the prison industrial complex was built up with the globalization the last time in the background. There was this obsessed workforce, and how was global capital going to profit off of those bodies that have been pushed out of work? Well, we will incarcerate them and create new profit streams in the carceral state. So now we are approaching this next revolution, which is a new phase of globalization, which is centered on essentially global competition for labor work, task rabbit jobs, gig economy jobs where you would be competing against individuals from all over the world, either through screen-based work or through haptic controllers. So there's this vast amount of globalization. This next wave, it's going to be even like the globalization that we saw of service work. Like, we know a lot of teachers are doing VIP Kid, they're doing distance learning. They were teaching kids in China, but now everybody's doing distance learning. So all of these, even white collar jobs and professional class jobs, are going to go online. And once they're digitized, then you're opened up to competing for people all across the globe. And they're working increasingly on automated language translation. So even the language isn't going to be as much of an issue in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're teaching that through the AI. So we're approaching this. And so what do we do with all of these people that are excess now, right? They're not going to build, they do not want to invest in the amount of prisons that it would take to divert all of these excess labor's people as we move to globalized labor and robots into prisons. They don't want to build that many prisons. So essentially what's happening now is all of these satellites are launching, is that we are turning the world into a virtual prison.
An open prison.
The Internet of Things.
And so is that connected to geofencing? Because I've heard you talk about that. Can you make that connection for people to know what that means?
Well, and I think people are familiar with e-carceration, right? So that's been a shift. Like, oh, well, we won't have people actually in physical prisons, but we'll move them out into an electronic monitoring system, which is also very oppressive, because people are paying for these monitors and they're being monitored, like ankle bracelets and all sorts of things like that. Now it's going to be moved to a whole nother level with these Internet of Things sensors. Here, let me just click over to the next slide. Yeah, so blockchain. We're moving towards having smart cities.
Blockchain is good.
Well, in China, they're using it to track the people on parole.
Jesus
so
Christ.
That's what I'm saying. It's a sensor. So it's like right now we have, people have their phones, and that's their main Internet of Things. But you have smart trash cans, you have smart street lights, your car is an Internet of Thing because it's tracking where you go, your Easy Pass is an Internet of Things, your digital payments are Internet of Things. Everything is aggregating all of this data.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, like, I'm trying to frame it that a lot of folks who are working on addressing the problems with the justice system and addressing the prison industrial complex is that huge amount of money is going to be a cost offset. And they're going to start shifting people into a different nature of state control. So it will not be people being held in physical facilities. It will be people who are managed by social workers, by healthcare providers, by other things. And you will be given a pathway and a self-improvement program. And it will be like through diversion courts, right? So you still have criminalized poverty, but if people are brought in under low, like misdemeanors, they'll be put in a program. And these programs will underpin this layer of stakeholder capitalism. And the technology that's doing that's aggregating all of the data, both to develop a robust profile, a predictive profile of you, but also to support on the back end these impact investment, the data analytics that they need to justify these impact investments, was being piloted in China, but through the US. So it's not really, I'm asking people to sort of break down a lot of their understandings of the world, is that right now this is power. This is global power. This is the billionaires and the AI versus the whole world. So Silicon Valley is taking their technology into China and vice versa, and they're refining things together to control the masses that they know will be pushed out of work by the robots. Yeah. So this slide sort of speaks to that, just that, okay, so in China, they're using blockchain to track the parolees and address their social credit scoring. The little box there, that's Jim Heckman and J.B. Pritzker, the current governor of Illinois. And Heckman is out of the University of Chicago, and he was refining a lot of these impact equations in China. So again, there's collaboration in ways that people are used to thinking of them as being separate, but they're not nearly as separate as people think.
Can you explain the social credit system a little bit in China, whatever you know about it? What is that?
So essentially in China, there are some social credit scores are governmental, and then some are at a like credit card companies. It's actually, people talk about Sesame credit and social credit scoring as if it's a Chinese thing, but really we all know what it means, because the United States refined the credit scoring systems, right? We all know what the credit scoring profiles are, and they're becoming increasingly granular. So this is the idea of taking a credit, but it's not just about your debt or repayment schemes, but more on your behavior as a good citizen. So they could track.
Wow. And the government gets to decide what's good and what's not.
Right. So there's different ones. Like there's a government level one, but then there are also, like, imagine Jeff Bezos, which we already know Amazon will price things for one person differently than another person, right? They have dynamic pricing. So imagine Alibaba, which is Jack Ma, which is the largest equivalent in China. They have their own scoring. So like maybe you're a special customer, you get X price, someone else gets this other price.
That's supposed to be illegal in the United States. They shouldn't be able to do that shit.
Well, I mean, they have all the analytics, right? They say, oh, well, you put that in your shopping cart 2 weeks ago, and now we'll drop the price a little bit, see if you get it now, right? Like they have all, it's all automated. So there's the retail side of things. And one of them, Tencent, is the other giant company under Alibaba. They're a major investor in video games. They have facial recognition payment and also their own social credit scores. So when you're hearing, like recently in the last week or so, they've talked about the IMF saying that your credit score should connect to your Google searches, your online searches.
I saw that.
It's all the same. It's all the same. It's about profiling you against a social expectation. So let me just scooch over to the next thing. And just to sort of clarify again, so we're breaking down geopolitical. I'm saying this is not one country versus another country. I mean, there's a bit of that, but this is about power, a very elite class of billionaires and asset holders against everyone else. The other piece is that this is fully bipartisan, what's advancing in terms of social.
Please talk about that, please, because let me just say, Black people feel like Democrats are going to save us, and we have to. I'm so frustrated because I want our community specifically to understand that all of these people are in on this. This is a game that's being played on the masses. Go ahead.
It is. So it's, I mean, in Philadelphia, because we are being piloted as an impact economy. I mean, we are a Democratic city. We always have been. And we had a special poverty committee to sort of get this jump started. And many of the key figures advancing this are Black politicians, Black Democratic politicians. And I don't know, I can't say that they know all of the things I know, right? But the reality is that this runs on people being dependent on the state, because these arrangements and the level of control would not be possible if people were economically independent. So the impact markets rely on the fact that you do not have your own economic independence and that you must access these state services, which are going to be privatized largely as investment opportunities and tied to data analytics. And in that, the people who are using the services will become commodified as data. So just like, my first entry point into this was like third grade test scores, right? These third grade test scores were everything. Everything had to center education into a third grade test score. Well, now imagine that for every aspect of your life. Your workforce, your food, your housing voucher, everything is based on some metrics that an investor, Goldman Sachs, sets that you are expected to live up to, whether or not it makes sense for your own life or not. And what I would say is a lot of these metrics might make sense on the paper as a deal, but they do not materially benefit in the long run the individuals. Because ultimately, if we create a global investment market in poverty, what you have is, if it is profitable, you will only have more better managed poverty. That's the logic of the market. I mean, that's just how. So I just have two images here. This is from a couple of summers ago when they were rolling out the seed funding for this Pay for Success fund. This was in the Dirksen Senate building. And, I traveled down there with a friend who was a teacher, and we were like the only two people and like several hundred people in this giant room to sort of confront this issue that children should not be used in this way as investment commodities. And it just hit me very hard because there were individuals from Philadelphia in this room as well, that all of the speakers, the keynote speakers at this event, which was about a 3-hour event, were Republican congressmen and senators. There were maybe 4 or 6 who were giving the keynote speeches. But then the panelists that you can see in this image on the right, the woman in the black shirt, like used to be with Goldman Sachs. Those are all people who were on like laid out policy under Obama. So at that time, it was very fully connected on both sides. It was very clear to me. And there were several hundred people in this room who were all part of entities, many nonprofits that were aligned in the social sector who were going to benefit from these deals that are coming. Like I don't know how I found out about it, but like it got the Eventbrite. So we went down, but we were like the only 2 regular, you can kind of see in the picture, it was a big room. It was full of people and they were toasting with champagne.
Oh, I've been to the Dirksen Center building before, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a big room and it was full. It was like standing room only. So this is the other piece. I had mentioned Judith Rodin, who was the former president of Penn, set up much of this when she left the University of Pennsylvania, which is here in Philadelphia. She became president of the Rockefeller Foundation. So in the aftermath of the last global economic crash, when the housing market crashed, it destabilized so many people. And it actually set up, like if you understand this as a poverty management sector, like that this is
it's a poverty management, not eradication of poverty. They just want to manage it.
You're going to make money on poverty.
They're going to, not just manage it. They actually going to make money on it.
They're going to make money on poverty. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
But it's going to sound really good to you. It's going to sound like they care.
It's going to sound wonderful. Yeah, let's keep going.
So she set this up. She set up, it's a new game, right? And that's, I would encourage people, if they haven't watched the film, The Big Short, The Big Short is very clever in how they talk about how this scandalous game of gambling on people's mortgages happened, and these the debt obligations, and that in many respects these powerful interests, nobody's looking over them. They make their own rules. So a lot of times when I talk about this to people, they say it doesn't make sense. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. But when you're powerful, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, because you make the rules. As long as all the rich people, as long as all the influencers are on the same page and the game makes sense to them to play, they will play the game. It doesn't have to be logical in the real world. They're making their own logic. And even actually at one scene in the film, they were hoping that the mortgages would default, because they had bet that there would be defaults and they would make money if the mortgages defaulted. And they were defaulting, but they never changed the bond ratings. And then I
remember that. I watched it.
The people who had made this call realized that the actual reality was completely disconnected from the market, and like to an extent that you couldn't even place a bet because there was no logic to it whatsoever. And so that's what I'm saying. Just keep that in mind going forward. But the seed money, because none of this is actually free, like actual markets. It all has to be underpinned with seed money, with government money, with philanthropy money to set up the infrastructure for this to happen. This isn't the market. This isn't poor people asking to be managed as a data commodity. This is the government creating a market in managing poor people for global finance. Okay. And not just US global finance, total global finance. So the seed funding that was there to set up the pilot projects, and these are called pay for success deals or social impact bonds, came out of the Social Innovation Fund. And so it's all based on public-private partnerships. And this came through the National Corporation for the Corporation for National and Community Service. So AmeriCorps is embedded in that, and Senior Corps. But their other division is this innovation fund to do the seed money to get these deals started, because they need to, it's like when you prototype a new manufactured product. You don't go and make 10,000 before you know if it works. You start small and you refine. So for the last 10 years, they've been refining these projects, and a lot of them are based in policy and software. So once you get the policy in place and the software, you can scale it pretty quickly. Once you get the digital identity, which is what I'm going to talk about. But, it's important because, this is named after Ted Kennedy. Like, this is right after he died. Like, it is it's not exclusively, because I'll talk about workforce reskilling, and Ivanka Trump was just in Davos talking about blockchain workforce badges. It's fully bipartisan, but it is, in Philadelphia, what I'm sort of struggling with is folks, and so this is just a reminder. So Goldman Sachs, the last crash, set it up. These are the key figures here. So we have Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, who's doing this great reset. And then on the other side, we have Bill Gates, that people are very familiar with, but also Michael Bloomberg. And I would say in many respects, Michael Bloomberg is more dangerous than Bill Gates, because Michael Bloomberg is going to be running the global police state. So that's
wait. Okay, hold on, because Black people need to. When you talk about a police state, that's important to us.
Yeah.
And I want you to just dig into that a little bit. Tell
Right.
us what you mean by Michael Bloomberg is going to be running the global police state.
Right. Okay. So let me just go back. So Michael Bloomberg, through Bloomberg Philanthropies, among other entities, has set up, and with Harvard, so they have a partnership with Harvard Kennedy School where they train government officials to implement data-driven policies.
Yeah, Jackson's mayor been down there. Birmingham's mayor has been down there. A lot of Black mayors.
And in fact, I mean, I know this because our former mayor, Michael Nutter, was his right-hand man selling this program.
Jesus.
So when Michael Nutter left Philadelphia, I think he was on the board of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve. He joined with Michael Bloomberg. He was connected, I think, with Department of Homeland Security. Like, he went off and just did all of these things that were setting up this next phase of the program. So in order for these poverty management markets to exist, they need to both, I said, have the policy in place, right? You have to have the policy in place to set up the public-private partnerships. And you have to have the culture of data-driven everything. Everything must be data-driven. And what I'm trying to say is that even though in many respects, I think they would like to, and maybe you could speak to this, but I think that there's a presumption that is not accurate, that if you only had more data, that there would be more justice. Like, that's what I'm saying.
Got all the data in the world. They've been looking at data for centuries.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I think that there is a big push to say, if we had more data, there would be more equity. If we had more of this, it would get fixed.
I hear a lot of, okay, thank you for saying that, because I'm sick of that shit. Because I hear that a lot from academics. Well, we just need to collect more data. We just need to collect more data. We just need to do another report. How many more reports you need to do before we actually get to changing the material conditions of the people? We see that a lot in the NGO space. We see that a lot in the nonprofit space, and you see that a lot in academia. So is there connections between all of this stuff in academia, NGO?
Right. Yeah. Well, so essentially, the cost offset structure that we're going to talk about for these impact deals rely on a credentialed equation. Someone has to come up with the equation that is the rule of the game. And they say, if you meet these metrics, this is your return on investment. So Jim Heckman, that I pointed out at the beginning, he has the equation for pre-K investing. So he said, you're going to get a 7 to 10% rate of return on pre-K investing, up to 13 if you count health data. So he said that. He set the equation. I'll show another one, Teachers College, Columbia University. They set the return on investment, I think it was 11% on effective social emotional learning curriculum. There's this guy, Richard Layer, who's in the UK. I'm not sure. I think it's London School of Economics. He has a labor economics. They scaled the whole creation of the mental health through the NHS, the public health systems. The mental health treatment was all scaled on an equation based. The cost offset was like depression tied to unemployment or underemployment. So they used that equation to scale the mental health treatment system in the UK. But what that meant was everything had to be data driven. So if you had a treatment program that was not collecting data on the clients, that couldn't prove, quote unquote, the effectiveness, it wasn't going to get funded. So you end up with things that are like text therapy, like VR therapy, teletherapy on a screen, something that you can get a data metric, because that's what the financial deals are going to require. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's why under lockdown, like education has to be online. Medicine has to be online. All of these things have to be mediated through a device to capture the data. But it is the academic institutions that are essentially giving the stamp of approval to say, this is good. And actually, this whole structure was set up through NYU, their GovLab. They created a GovLab. It actually was in partnership with, I forgot. They called Neil Kleinman was the guy at NYU. And then there was another guy at Harvard who was the conservative. So they had the liberal and the conservative. And they set up what they call a new operating system for government. And it's all based in behavioral economics and nudges and digital surveillance. And the thing to point out here with Michael Bloomberg and Bill Gates is that they partnered on something called Domain Awareness System in Lower Manhattan, which was at the time a very sophisticated, coordinated surveillance system of cameras that was developed through Microsoft. And then New York City got kickbacks whenever they sold this system to other entities, like other cities. And so New York City was making money, but it was a partnership with Microsoft directly. And my feeling is that even within, like, some of this overlaps with the gaming environment, that they had like the Xbox motion capture. I'm not a gamer, so I can't remember the exact, but it's called Connect with a K. And
yeah,
so,
I'm not a gamer either, but I'm sure the people in the comments probably know what you're talking about.
If there's something that you would put on your TV and then you would be in front of it and it would learn your movements, your physical movements. Now you can apply that. You were seeing like how that fits in with facial recognition and gait analytics in lockdown, right? Like they're using those in China to, keep people distant. Are people distancing? So they're using all of their layering up all of this information. Who would think video games would overlap with like real-time state surveillance? But it is happening.
That's going to be hard for people to accept.
Well, see, that's what I'll come back to, like in the next slide. But what I want to
let's come back to it, and I want you to come back to, because there's an important question. So let me tell everybody, questions will be taken when we get towards the end of her slides. She's willing to stay on to answer any questions. So if we don't get to your question right now, I promise we will get to your question toward the end of this presentation. Just allow us to get through the presentation, and I promise we're going to get to your questions. But there's a sister in the comments who was like, she wants to know, what does the return on investment for pre-K look like, and give examples. And I know you're going to talk about that. So just keep going. I just wanted to make sure I brought that up, because I'm
not sure I actually put amply in here. So I will say, let me just, like, before I move on. So so what I had said, that there are pilots. The pilots aren't just in the United States, they're all around the world, because this is global, right? Before I leave Michael Bloomberg, I'll say that not only does he own mayors and officials in the United States, in the EU, and in India. So it's broad. And I will say, actually, so Michael Bloomberg was the ambassador to the World Health Organization and to the ambassador to the UN for climate change. So all of these things are running through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And then actually, literally the day before the pandemic was announced as a pandemic, there was something called the National League of Cities, and over 2,000 elected officials and high-level municipal officials all flew into DC to lobby.
I'm familiar with the National League of Cities, yeah.
So literally they had a town hall with Michael Bloomberg to talk about COVID. No distancing, no nothing. I mean, I think maybe they did like an elbow bump, but like you can see pictures of them all in the room together. Like, again, these are people, because the pandemic was essentially like called in February for the liability waivers. So like if you were a high level, if you're the mayor of Austin or something, like, this, like you're in the loop on this stuff. They still all flew to DC to do this gathering. And then they had the town hall with Michael Bloomberg, and the next day it was called. Right. So, I mean, Ghebreyesus and Bloomberg are very close. This is all running not only through the United States, but all of the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's a global construct, what's happening here. But I will mention Amply. So the Amply, they're developing these early stage pilots. This is connected to blockchain identity and tokenomics. But they have this program in Cape Town, South Africa, because it's all very racialized. This is all racialized. It's not a coincidence that the pilot for this is in Cape Town, right? And so what they would do is they had a franchise pre-K, and I think increasingly they're actually targeting Black women, as an economic business opportunity to come into their franchise, because once you're a franchise owner, you can't refuse to put kids on blockchain, right? And so they get credit for lifting women out of poverty as pre-K owners, but then they can make them do
They're targeting Black women. That is so important that you said that.
No, they're targeting. And then they're going to make money on that, because they're going to say, look, we improved their metrics. We improved their economic activity. So they get credit for that. They put the teachers on blockchain. Well, in this one, they only have, I think maybe the school is on blockchain, and the children and the families. And then the pre-K provider would get paid back from the government how many children per day. So they told the operators that they could not, they weren't going to do paper anymore. And a lot of this is also racist. I mean, part of it is like, oh, you might be fudging your numbers if you just do paper, right? Here, we made you an app. Here's the app on the phone. So now every day when the child comes in, you click them in with the app. It's very simple. It's a very, very basic pilot. And they actually framed it.
I'm sorry, they're doing this in Ohio. When you just said that, that reminded me, my daughter is 6. She's born in Dayton, Ohio. And I remember when they made the big switch with the child care subsidies from the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. You couldn't do paper anymore. You just triggered a memory. And I remember they gave us all cards, and they would penalize the child care centers if they didn't use the thing that's hooked up to the computer. And I was just like, but it was a hassle for everybody. Yeah. And then they started doing everything, because everything is about preschool promise now. Everything is about early childhood education. Everything is about like systematizing, and we just got to make sure we get these old Black people, these Black women who've been keeping kids for all their life and been getting paid.
They want to push all those women out because it's going to be a franchise. So that's the thing. Like, all of the lovely neighbor woman down the block, the grandparents, like, who are connected to the kids, those women, because what's going to happen is they won't they won't have the data, right? They'll come in I don't have a slide for this because I wasn't doing pre-K, but like they're using surveillance Playtables, right? To like use fisheye lenses and film kids. Well, the lady down the block is not going to buy a surveillance Playtable and put it in her living room. It's not going to happen. So essentially corporate America or corporate wherever, South Africa, the franchises will capture all of the child care provisions, and then it will be all standardized. And they're
forcing families who can't afford to pay the lady down the block, because they get the government subsidy to pay for child care. I used to get a government subsidy to pay for child care. That's how I know this happened. Then you're going to be forced to go to the franchises.
With the surveillance Playtable. Yeah. We Play Smart, Hatch Education, We Play Smart. You guys can look it up. But that's what, and they actually, in their language, they framed it as, this is wonderful because guess what? This child can help, it helps build their social capital. Wow. They actually said that, like in their literature, it's helping children build their social capital, which is really back end for saying, we know when you skip out and you didn't bring your kid to school. We know when your kid came in late. We know if your kid's out sick, because it's all going onto your social credit score. Like they frame it, that's the thing. They frame it as it's a positive. Look, you're building your credit score.
Yeah, that's the play. That's the behaviorist kind of like propaganda socialization. This is good for you.
Right. Look, you can aspire to be your best branded self, like be the best pre-K toddler you can be. So, and the thing is, so I'm saying this because I researched these things, and then I was at a gathering of press, because they're actually collecting all of the nonprofit press to sell this. It's called Solutions Journalism. And they've invaded all of the newsrooms and all of the journalism schools and all of the, like even in Philadelphia, the major daily paper, the Inquirer, is within a foundation. It technically is a nonprofit. So they gathered everybody from like the Afrofuturist podcast to like, the Jewish newspaper, this Latino newspaper, and the Inquirer, the NPR station in one room. And they said, we're all going to be selling this. And I'm, running around trying to like figure out who to talk to. And I finally found a woman who was pointing out that it was like not a diverse group of people in the room. And so I was explaining this to her, and she said she had been briefed. She was in community development in the city, and that she had been briefed on this app like the week before. So it's not just in Cape Town, right? People in my city know about this app, and like it's going to be coming. Like they're just building the structure for it. So
I'm sorry, what's the app again? What's the app?
It's called Amply, AMPLY.
All right, people look that up. AMPLY. Y'all gotta look that up.
And Innovation Edge and IXO Foundation. They're out of Switzerland. So I make these little movies because I have terrible, but like I just want to emphasize that this is a situation of global political economy. And I sort of frame it as a plumbing problem. So capitalism has to the money has to flow and capitalism has to grow. So the economy must continue to grow and the money must continue to move, because that's after the last crash, they said, everybody go out and keep spending money. Because if everybody stopped spending money, the whole thing would just explode. So the fluidity is important. But what happens with, and this is I did this little picture 3 years ago. Imagine what it's like under lockdown. So you've got this very vast amount of wealth concentration at the top, and you have all of these poor people, like they call it the bottom of the economic pyramid at the bottom. So how do the people at the top keep this machine running? And what they actually have to do is, so that's the liquidity piece of this, is they have to turn people into a commodity. So the people are no longer the consumers, the people are consumed. Okay.
So explain commodity. So like when you say people are going to be the commodity, that's that. So as African Americans in this country, we were once a commodity.
Yes.
When we were slaves, we were traded and people made
Right.
money off of us. You're saying that everybody now is about to be a commodity,
Yes.
and we're going to be traded in the digital form.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so like, a lot of people who are protesting like the economic consequences of what has been happening over the last 8 months are framing it as a patriot framing. Like many people who are pushing back, and I've seen this myself, and I'm saying, no, that isn't actually the proper framing. Because the proper framing, what is happening is that people are being treated as those who are enslaved, those who tried to navigate like these unfree labor systems and these, oppressive systems, as well as the indigenous people who were pushed off of their lands that they had and put into reservations and made dependence on the state. So to fully appreciate what is happening to white America, you have to own what happened to Black America and indigenous America. It's all of that piece. And so the patriot framing does not work, because in Philadelphia, there were like many amazing Black activists who surfaced the fact that our first president, because the first president, George Washington, lived in Philadelphia because DC hadn't been built yet. And he kept 9 people in slavery in his house in a city of free Blacks. And he wrote a letter saying, like, how do I keep my people enslaved? I'll take them back to Mount Vernon to keep them so that they don't qualify to become free. And so that is the history. And that's why it's vital for everyone to understand, the way I see it, is that this process of coming out, like to step towards justice, is one that has to be framed within that understanding, and preferably led by Black and brown people. That's how it feels to me. So that's why I'm offering you this intelligence. I'm not telling people what to do about it, but that is the framing that I think is really vital, because it is about human capital, and it is about treating people, if you watch The Big Short, it's these bundled mortgages, it's debt. It's about bundled debt. And that was bundled debt tied to buildings. The concentration of wealth that has accumulated in the last decade since the housing crash, it's only become more and more concentrated.
Of course, we see it.
Right. So it
became more concentrated during the damn pandemic. Look at how much money Jeff Bezos and all these people made.
Right.
I mean, what, Elon Musk, yeah.
So the only thing bigger than housing is people.
Jesus.
That's the only thing bigger. And the earlier, the better, because the more deals you can make on them. And that's why they want the babies. And they actually want unborn babies. They want people, they want pregnant women. In Tanzania, they had the first blockchain baby was born in 2018. And this is running through humanitarian aid too. Because as early as the deals are, you can get them. And it's also embedded in like eugenics. Because part of the fourth industrial revolution is synthetic biology and genetic engineering.
Transhumanism.
Yeah. So people need to understand it in that's the other part of the history that people need to know. So I will just encourage the rabbit hole that I went down. This is actually a real, there are these people who do foresight, like forecasting, foresight projects, just like these companies, these big mega companies, they have 20, 30, 50-year plans, and they gather these futurists, to sort of project forward. So this was one put out by Global Education Futures Forum. It's led by Pavel Leksha, who's out of Skolkovo in Russia, but it has representatives all around the globe. Tom Vander Ark is Bill Gates's guy in the US. And this is from a map of education. So they're talking about new models of human capital investment, investing in promising youth in human futures. And so as far as language, I want people to be familiar that opportunity youth falls in this category in particular. And I know there are many, many programs that are aimed at opportunity youth. It's not their opportunity, it's the investor's opportunity. That's the opportunity piece of this. And I don't have a slide of it here, but there's also in this map, if you go to Global Education Futures Forum, and Pavel Leksha, who is a transhumanist, by the way, he's tied to world skills and he is a transhumanist. They talk about a student genetic passport. Okay, so when we're talking about eugenics, this is really serious. Like they're almost saying like your education will be dependent on what your bioinformatic information is. And that is backed up by someone, Dominic Cummins, who was Boris Johnson's right-hand advisor, who's working on the NHSX in the UK. He's very much talking about education being linked to genomics. So, I mean, it's not as though they weren't already channeling people in different directions based on your race, but now though it'll be down to your genetic material. And that is very important to know that connects with Chan Zuckerberg, because they're pursuing things with Data Zone. Anyway, I'll talk about that later, but they're connected with the bioinformatics stuff. So this is just a horrible picture, but I just want you to show like what we're dealing with. These public-private partnerships are going to be running through what's called benefit corporations or B Corps. And the B Lab is actually in Berwyn. So again, in my area, it's right outside of Philadelphia. It's on the main line. It was funded by Judith Rodin, the Rockefeller, and they were setting the rules, this Global Impact Investment Network, the IRIS, which are the metrics that they need for the impact investing. And this is they had a white paper that was talking about like how great stakeholder capitalism was going to be. And they, this is from their report. This is something that they're thinking is a good thing, this image. And they're talking about the colonial capitalist, the industrial capitalist, the shareholder capitalist, and now the stakeholder capitalist. And like, this is the most evolved capitalist is the stakeholder one. So it's gross, but like, I just wanted people to see that because they don't think, like that's how they represent themselves to others. So, so this is another piece of it. So who are these stakeholder capitalists? Well, this is one of them. His name is Paul Tudor Jones, and he has Tudor Investments, but he also founded the Robin Hood Foundation. So, these folks have really long lead times, and the Robin Hood Foundation put a lot of money into the Harlem Children's Zone for over 30 years. And that was managed, Jeffrey Canada, very prominent, and also Stanley Druckenmiller was the chair of the board there. And Stanley Druckenmiller was George Soros's, a manager of one of his funds, his hedge funds. They developed over that time, offering wraparound services to the Black community in Harlem, all sorts of cost benefits for if you give a poor kid glasses, what is the economic return? If you give them housing, what's the economic return? And this book that they developed, the Robin Hood Foundation, is 168 pages of equations.
So tell us why that's not a good thing. Like if you give kids glasses, right? Like why if you give kids housing, like, because that sounds like, right, we want people to have glasses. We want people to have housing, right? Like we're yeah.
So it's going to be tied to the impact markets, which mean they are going to impact you. You are never going to have the independence to make your own, like, so in the housing, so we had this, these hearings, our poverty committee, okay? One of them was on housing. These housing bonds will be tied in with smart data collection increasingly. In fact, there'll probably be a job training program to train out of work people to put smart surveillance into housing for housing vouchers. And it will all be conditional on your behavior, that you conduct yourself according to the standards for the impact markets. Well, and what I said when I was testifying to the city council about this, I said, if you picture that economic pyramid, right? There's the one little white guy at the top. There's lots of folks at the bottom, predominantly Black and brown. There's no amount of behaving, good behavior, that will bring Jeff Bezos's or Michael Bloomberg's money down, right? It's a plummet. They're looking for the money to go up to them. Their money is always going to go up because they have the power. They can make the deal. They can structure the deal. No one's going to go to the people who have been pushed out of their house, evicted, and are on the corner to say, well, how do you feel we should set this deal up? They're going to go to Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase and say, well, what does this deal look like for you? What kind of numbers can we put in to make this deal work for Goldman Sachs?
Jesus.
So what I'm saying is like, it's a political economy problem that if they're making money off of this poverty, it doesn't grow the pie. Like it doesn't give the people it may keep them, it may slightly ameliorate their situation.
So you mean to tell me, now we got to talk about this.
But does that make sense?
No, it may, I'm getting there.
Okay.
But I am a person who believes that people's basic needs should be met. I also believe people need to be taxed. I'm not for the tax cuts that not just Trump did, but the tax cuts that have been happening since they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, right?
Yeah.
I believe that there needs to be a redistribution of wealth. That's who I am. I believe in the common good, that people's basic needs should not be tied to anything. They just need them to live.
Right.
I also am a Black American. I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans in this country. I want reparations.
Yeah.
I believe in Medicare for all. You mean to tell me that I can't get reparations and Medicare for all without being tied to some kind of social impact? What is it?
Social impact. Well, ultimately, it's a performance-based government contract. Yeah, that's how it's going to be. I mean, does Paul Tudor Jones look like he's like the kind of guy who wants to just give his money away to people because he's a good guy? I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's the logic, folks. Like, we are not that organized to demand this. If people want to just hand you some payout, it's not going to be no strings. I mean, I know they're saying it's no strings. It's not going to be no strings. It's because they've structured these human capital markets. It's because if we—
Can you break down that for people? What is the human capital market?
All right. Let me zoom forward a little bit. I think I have my another. Okay. So there's Canada. I do want to point out, so this Stanley Druckenmiller, who worked with Jeffrey Kennedy and Paul Tudor Jones, he and George Soros is not buying activists. George Soros is buying economists. George Soros is buying economists. Don't get that right. He's buying stuff. There are no good billionaires. He's not a good guy, but he's buying economists. He's not buying Antifa or people in the street. He's buying the economists. So in 1992, they shorted the British pound. They shorted the British pound and they got $5.5 billion in one day.
What?
Yes, read that. In his discussion of his experiences with the legendary Soros, Druck related the story of how he identified the British pound as a near lock short back in 1992. Short, he's betting against it. Remember, there is people betting against you on these impact bonds back in 1992. And he told Soros he was making a huge bet, 5.5 billion on it. And Soros said, don't be a fool. You should put at least 200 worth our net 15 billion on this once in a 20-year opportunity. We didn't get the whole 15 billion on, but we got enough that I'm sure some people in the room have read about it. Billions in one day. And they shorted the pound. What would they do to black toddlers?
Come on.
These are not the good guys.
Come on.
They're not. They're gamblers. These are not justice people. And so this is the history that I think is really important, because a lot of this is tied up in insurance companies and health insurers, is that the Zong. So in 1781, this ship full of enslaved people hit the doldrums, and they had taken out an insurance policy, but the insurance policy didn't cover if they just died. But it did cover them if they drowned. So they started throwing people overboard.
To make money.
Yes. And these are the people we're talking about. These are the people in charge. And they're working through the Federal Reserve. So this is from the mid-1990s. Steve Rothschild set it up with Art Rolnick of the Minneapolis Fed, and he was involved in workforce training programs for adult men, probably many of them coming out of the justice, incarceration system, and about workforce reskilling. So these capital bonds are real. They're coming out of the central banking systems. And I had mentioned too about Duckworth, that this is eugenics. A lot of this, Angela Duckworth works closely with Jim Heckman, who did the pre-K equation. And she advances grit. She's like, that's her specialty, is grit, like bootstrap. And Francis Galton is sort of the grandfather of eugenics. And she still uses him, not in a negative way, in her slide deck. And this is her slide deck. So we're looking at
hold on. I'm sorry. She really included a quote from this eugenicist in her slide deck?
Yes, this is a screenshot. Positive psychology, character grit, and research methods.
And she included. Do they believe that regular people don't know who Galton is or something? Like, we don't know. I mean, I know. Maybe people don't know who he is, but I mean, I'm very familiar.
This is at Penn. They're the overlords. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, my child was at a magnet school in Philadelphia with the kids of the overlords. And it really, I mean, I'm saying this honestly, like, because you're told to do these things, right? Oh, if you're a good parent, you do this, you try to get your kids in that school or this school, do this thing, you know, and if you're lucky, maybe if you're lucky, you get at the end and you go, oh, this was really about training the overlords.
Jesus.
And you know what I mean? And so that was my realization. And I'm not proud of it. Like, you know, society conditions you. Like, here's your path. And if you're to be a good person and excel in society, this is what you do. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where I really realized, and in fact, Wharton was cultivating kids from this school to do a social impact summer program, high school juniors, to raise them literally to be the social entrepreneurs. That, I mean, there's a race and class thing too going on, right? Like, they need people to run this program. And I'm here today because I see the writing on the wall of what there is no going to be wiggle room. You literally are going to either, the best you can hope for if your kid runs the gauntlet is that your kid can be helping and be an overlord. You're either going to be the oppressed or you're going to be the overlord over the oppressing people. And as a mother, I don't want that future for my kid. I don't want a world run on data analytics for Michael Bloomberg and the police state where if you're lucky, you get to be the one to oppress people on a daily basis, because there's psychological harm in all of that. Like, that's why I feel like there's a unifying opportunity here if we understood what it was within a historic context. And I'm not trying to erase, you know, anything, but we actually have to know what it is we're fighting. And that's what I'm trying to tell people. So you said, how do these deals work? So this is like an infographic that I developed. Again, it's not going to totally make sense. I will say, like, I have other things that you can include in a link afterwards if people want to spend some time, because it almost is like learning a new language. They are. It's like learning a new language. And I will say, I would love for people to like prove me wrong, but I don't know that I haven't had that happen yet. I don't want this to be true, but this seems to be how things are coming, is that you have, a key feature of all of this, the public-private partnerships, is that you have ongoing austerity, okay?
Oh, we see that shit.
Right.
We're living through that.
Right. But if the government had the resources, as you said, people should be taken care of.
Right.
The elderly should be, you know, we should have access to childcare. Our elders should be taken care of. You know, our veterans should be taken care of. No one should be on the street in the rich, this rich country. But austerity, fiscal municipal austerity, is a precondition. Then you come up with a contract. So what's happening, and I want to say that in this near frame future, the accounting firms and the law firms are going to make bank on this stuff because they need lots of contracts.
Accounting firms and law firms.
Yes. And increasingly, they're developing law firms where you're coding, because this is actually, imagine a world of coded contracts, of digitally coded contracts that are embedded in the built environment, right? Imagine the person on parole in Foshan, China. The way in which you interact with your physical environment may end up being different than the person next to you based on your status. Like directly, like the door may or may not open, right? The elevator may or may not go up. The digital wallet may or may not work. Like, all of these things will be mediated by contracts, but they are contracts that are increasingly carried out in computer code. So there's this merger happening now of coding. And I will say the accounting, from the history standpoint, a key element of the maritime trade, which was often in Black bodies, right? That was a huge part of maritime trade, was the rise of double entry bookkeeping in the West. So I think it was done through the Catholic Church. It was part of doctrine of discovery. We can go in, we can steal people, we can steal resources. We will account for them in these accounting books. The ledger is important. The accounting ledger is important. Now, the next ledger is the blockchain ledger. So the blockchain ledger is this decentralized encrypted ledger for the next phase of the human capital mining program. And so it is very logical that the accounting firms, the KPMGs, the Accenture, the Deloitte, that these big firms are in on this social innovation. They frame it as social innovation. So they will pick a success metric. So this is the deal. They write the contract, because this is about outcomes-based contracting, a pay for performance. And so much of the pay for performance language in the education space, the VAM, the value added measures, which is a weirdly agricultural construct, was never meant to be human teachers. Eventually, it was always value-added model was for computer programs. It was just temporarily for human teachers. It was always going to be for these digital interventions. But you would set a success metric. So I will give an example. One of the first social impact bond in pre-K in the United States. These bonds started in the United Kingdom with social finance. Michael Bloomberg brought them from the UK with Ronald Cohen here. There was one at Rikers Island around prison incarceration, and then there was one in Salt Lake City for pre-K. The way they structured this pre-K deal, and you guys can look it up online, it's in Salt Lake City, was that they said there's a cost offset. And this premise is that it's all based in predictive profiling, and they profile you into being a burden on society, and they quantify that. So let that sink in. They are using predictive analytics to predictively profile your degree of brokenness, again, within a white Western financialized construct mindset, right? You will be a burden. You haven't done anything wrong yet, but based on your parents, your zip code, your genomics, you're going to be this, maybe a little burden or you're a big burden. Like you're going to have, but everybody's a burden. And if we can preemptively fix you for less cost than paying for you after you got broken, there will be a cost differential between paying for once you're broken versus fixing you. There's like a gap between. And that is the space in which the profit is negotiated. So they will say, oh, we just want our money back plus a little slice of this money we saved you. So let that sink in, okay? Everyone is predictively profiled into being a burden on society at some extent, particularly Black and brown people, particularly people because this runs on trauma, epigenetic trauma.
So wait a minute. Now I'm thinking about this now, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm thinking about this because there are people who are in my sphere, right, in the education justice space, that swear by the community school model is the way to go when it comes to educating children in trauma. Trauma actually triggered that thought. There are people who are organizing with labor unions, with activists, people who literally have the right things at heart about what our children need. And I just want you to explain why the community school model may not be what we think we want it. I mean,
I have a slide of that coming up.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. All right.
But I will say, and I'm not saying that trauma isn't important, that I'm not denying the long-term health impacts of trauma. But what I'm saying is that what the idea is that you will take a vital, spiritual, sacred human life, right? And you will distill it into data, and you will distill it not as a beautiful potential gift to society, but this structure inherently says this child is already broken. And we know that this is a mentality that exists. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I'm saying from a financial market standpoint, it's actually part of the market structure. Okay.
We'll make money off of broken people. Got it.
Yeah. And then which will only precipitate making more broken people. And if you're too broken and not fixable, you're probably not a good investment. And if you're not very broken and you don't have much upward potential, you're not a good investment. But that's where grit comes in.
What are they going to do with the people that are not good investments? What's the plan for them?
I don't know.
You don't want to speculate. Okay, I got you. Yeah, I mean, I've already made my
but we should. So they have a narrow success in Salt Lake City. The pre-K bond that Goldman Sachs backed, that the woman that I confronted at the panel said, "Don't put babies on surveillance playtables." She set up that deal, and that deal said we are screening. 100 toddlers. We used a tool. We screened them into this pre-K program that Goldman Sachs funded. It wasn't a luxurious program, although it was in person. And the cost offset was special education. So they said, if we give these children who are screened into this program, who we think might need special education, pre-K, then our bet is they won't need special education when they enroll in kindergarten. And I'm not sure if the kids got 1 or 2 years of pre-K, Goldman Sachs pre-K. But what happened was, of the 100 kids that got screened into the program, only one of them qualified. And what the people said was, even if you gave them Mercedes-Benz level quality pre-K, you were still only going to maybe get 50% of them not needing it. Like if you actually had a legit tool that screened kids that in need, like it was not that good that you could have gotten 99% of the kids not needing it and only one needing it. So Goldman Sachs made a ton of money on this deal. And then the question is, did they screen kids into the program who wouldn't have needed it anyway? Like maybe they were English language learners, you know, that they really just needed time to learn English and they weren't going to need pre-K. Or were they denying services to kids who legitimately needed services, or some combination? But that's what I'm saying. Like you can game the numbers. And when you're gaming the numbers with people's lives, I mean, we already know that that's happening somewhat in the test score phase. But for the most part, with the exception of like the third grade reading retention, they're not hurting the kids directly. Like they might hurt the school district or the school, but they're not actually harming the kid.
Well, they are hurting the kids on that really quickly. And there are states, Florida was one of the first to pass it, Ohio, and I know this.
The third grade guarantee,
the third grade reading guarantee.
And
they are holding kids back.
Yeah, so this deal, that was Salt Lake City. Then they did one in Chicago that was same thing, pre-K, but with a third grade test score. So that third grade test score has always been for the impact bonds.
I never knew that.
The harshness of that third grade hard line was always for the social impact bonds. Goldman Sachs was in that one too when they were making maximum payments, getting maximum payments out of that. The one in the Chicago model. It's scary. I can send you the link to the article on that.
So they're getting paid now off of their third grade?
It's going like it's a multi-year. Like it's well, I don't know now that kids aren't in school. I don't know the terms of that contract. But they're making multiple amounts of money off of both pre-K and the third grade test scores. So the point I want to make too is so the investors provide the upfront money. And then again, the money in this deal is not in this little slice that exists. Because people say, why would you go to that much trouble for that little bit amount of money? That's not where the money in the deal is. The deal is in the debt, the securitized traded debt. And that's where the hedge funds come in, right? So like, if you were just looking at capitalists, right? Like say venture capitalists who are investing in an ed tech company, like I might have a problem thinking like, I don't want my kid on Dreambox or I don't want it, whatever, but it's a company. The hedge funds are really just gambling. And once you realize they can short kids, you know, a lot of this is framed by Bloomberg as what works government, results for America, evidence-based, you know, we're investing in results. But once you securitize this debt tied to public service provision, privatized welfare, like public benefit systems, everything from education to healthcare to housing to food assistance, someone's going to bet short it. So
that's where they make the money.
And it's institutional, right? It's not like in some small cases, it may be one person, but it's your pension fund. Like your pension fund could be betting against a whole bundled debt of toddlers on surveillance playtables. And you would not even know it, right? That's what, and it hasn't fully manifested yet, but that is the logic of how this will go. So then this is the other piece about why the data. The people have to create the data. And so you have to, this is why the end of year test scores had to go away. If you are going to create a derivatives markets on data, and one end of year test was not enough. One data point at 12 months is not enough to run a hedge fund. You need real-time data moving because derivatives markets, they function on the movement. And so
we don't know what derivatives market is. I don't know what it is.
All right. Well, essentially it's securitizing these debts and saying like the housing market is going up and down and someone's betting on it, right? So it's going up and down. But if the up only happens once a year, that's not many bets. Like if the data that informs if the market is up or down is one set of standardized test scores, and it's like, where's Dayton this year? Oh, they're here. Wait 12 months. Where's Dayton now? Oh, it's here. That's not enough betting. They want it going up and down all the time. And so that's why
how they make the money. I got that now.
Because you only get a certain number of bets, but the more data flow, the more bets you can make, or the more rapidly you can make bets. And
that's
so
why they need the access to the data.
Yeah. So it moved.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in Philly, it moved from like an end of year test to benchmarks. Oh, everybody needs a benchmark test. And then in Philadelphia, it became SLOW, student learning objectives. Oh, you need to test the kids before you taught them anything. And then test them after to see how much they grew. I mean, and this is ridiculous. Like, this is the stuff where the kids would cry, because why would you test a kid on something you hadn't taught them yet? It's brutal, actually. But you're doing that because you need to show growth for these hedge fund markets. And it's increasingly going to be through not just screen-based technology, but wearable tech.
So let me ask you this, because right now, as you know, most schools are closed, and it's being framed as the white right-wing people who want to open up the schools, and they're leveraging Black babies to say, oh, we got to get them back in school and all these things like that. And I have been one of the few people at the very beginning, and people were mad at me saying that school, I wrote an article back in July, I said school is essential, because what I was afraid of was that school was going to be, like you're saying, all online, AI. And I'm like, why are the teachers unions out in front of this? They have to know that these big tech giants are going to swoop in, and eventually brick and mortar schools and schools as we know it will never be the same. Yep. AI and fucking robots going to be teaching our kids. I was like, why am I the only one that can see this shit?
I think it's the neural dust. I don't know. It's I mean, actually, I was having this, like, trying to, like, because one, I don't think people understand fully what these devices are capable of. They don't understand that they're capturing all sorts of information. Like, they can put a little blink of light that you don't even notice off of the camera, and it bounces off your retina, and they can get your pulse rate. And they determine how engaged you are in the material, like how stimulated you are by the material online by blinking off your eyes. And people don't know that. People don't know about the behavior, like the emotion recognition, and that all of that is feeding into profiles. Like, maybe not exactly everywhere right now, but this is all military technology, and they've developed it. And you know, I was tweeting with a woman who is in Harlem, who was, you know, part of, you know, a group asking for the schools to stay closed. And, you know, her feature profile was around Hewlett Packard laptops. And a lot of this goes into the digital divide conversation, right? Except in my mind, I think it's a digital jail, and people won't know till the door slams shut. But like, Hewlett Packard is actually foundational in this space. They have remade, the William and Florida Hewlett Foundation have remade the NGOs to all be data driven. They did that over the 10 years. They gave strategic grants to every single nonprofit sector, the nonprofit publications, the crowdsource platforms, the funding platforms, everything. They bought it all to make it data driven to run these markets. That's what's coming. But then people aren't also aware that they do biometric monitoring, and Hewlett Packard is integral in with the Border Patrol in Gaza. So I'm trying to tell this mom, right? Like, because it's a surveillance device, and increasingly we know, I mean, they are after the children as people become more insecure in their housing and their food, what the emotions of being, like, just trapped in your house. There's stuff that's going to be captured on these screens that if people, these systems, because it's a machine, they can make money off of breaking up families or putting families on self-improvement pathways. The data that they're collecting in the background on your, like, there's implications for families. It's dangerous for them to have necessarily an agent of the state in your house all the time, especially when essentially maybe they're
Black people definitely don't need to go
the
for
personalized
that
platform. And then, by the way, they're also going to run the impact market. Oh, and by the way, they're also doing biometric border patrol in Israel. So it's a big deal, but people don't know all the pieces. They only know a little piece. They only know that I want to demand my right to have nice things, right? I mean, that's the perception. And I know that's in Philadelphia, that we would gut low-income communities at their schools and then show up with carts of Chromebooks, and then people felt cared about.
Wow.
And they don't know what the long-term consequences are. It's not informed consent.
It is not informed consent. We need to underline that. Informed consent.
They don't know. They don't know. So I will say the other piece about informed consent. So one of the areas that's been a pilot of numerous pilot projects is the Santa Clara County in the Bay Area. So Silicon Valley, surprise, surprise. And they have 4 pay for success and social impact bonds. There's a pre-K called Strong Start. There is an early literacy, and I'm trying to remember the name of that. There's one called Partners in Wellness, which is mental health. And there's one called Welcome Home, and that's housing. Okay. So these deals have to provide cover for them, a third-party reviewer, to make it fair. They're like, oh, look, like someone looked and said, we met the terms of our contract. it's all okay. You know, it's not insider dealings, a third party reviewed it. Well, in the case of both the mental health and the housing social impact bond in Santa Clara, the third party reviewer was Palantir.
I've been telling people about Palantir as a company. They just IPO, meaning they're publicly traded now on the market.
Yeah. Well, so Palantir is essentially Peter Thiel's company. So it's PayPal. So it's digital currency, but it's also they're working with the Department of Homeland Security. They cut a deal with somebody in New Orleans about predictive policing and rolled out a program with like city council not even knowing about it. So they're doing all kinds of sly stuff about predictive profiling. And then on the side, they do philanthropy around human trafficking. But really what Palantir wants to know is where everybody is all the time. Mm-hmm. So imagine like you're a person who needs to access housing in Santa Clara County and someone in your extended family is undocumented. Oh, mm-hmm. By the way, did we not tell you Palantir's running all your data?
No, they ain't told nobody shit.
Yeah. So then ultimately they decide if the deal, the conditions of this outcomes-based contract are met or not met. But again, there are people who will short. So as much as everyone says, look, you know, this is how they sell it bipartisan. They say, oh, the conservatives are like, well, we're only paying if it works. We feel good about it because we're getting our money's worth. We're paying for what works. And then the liberal side say, well, people are getting taken care of, so we feel good about that, right? And then nobody's like actually hands-on about this part, about the Palantir part, or maybe like the surveillance Playtable part. Because what I will say is Jim Heckman, that earlier slide, part of his equation, he said, we can't move the data for cognitive skills, intelligence, because IQ hardens up around the age of like 8 to 10.
That's eugenics too. That's like a eugenics.
Totally. I'm not saying it's legit, but he's saying
I know, yeah.
It's not a good number. That's not, you know what is a good number? I know a good number is character. We can engineer character. And we can use it with video games. We can engineer character. So we can engineer you to be our proper global citizen. Know your place.
But you know, they've been trying to do that with Black children for years.
Well, so this is the thing. And it's so woven in. Like, and I agree, but so PBS Kids, so Jim Heckman on his website, the Human Capital Economic Opportunity Group, HCEO, they have a whole series of social emotional learning conference, like 2 different conferences he had. Each of them has about 10 different talks. One of them is about a PBS Kids app. And they're trying to get the parents to use this app and the children to use this app for preschoolers, right? And they can't, oh, this is terrible. You're going to hate me for this. But anyway, so this is Jim Heckman in this oak paneled room in University of Chicago with all of these esteemed academics around him he's brought here to talk to him about social emotional learning. And the one guy is saying, I can't get the parents to use this app. Like we try to do the research and they say they're going to use the app and they don't use the app. And Heckman, and he's like in his 70s, Nobel Prize winning economist. He looks at them and he said, and this is Head Start families, right? And he said, well, you're treating parents like they're experts.
Oh, ain't that oh wow.
And they said, those parents aren't experts. You know what? You need to game it for the parents. You need a good game. You need to game it like a Build a Kid game, but with a good incentive, a good, like pornography.
Wow.
And then the whole room is like cringing because they can't believe he just said that. And he's like, oh, just kidding about the pornography, but really like a good incentive. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with.
It's like Skinner's box.
Like, I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm totally shocked by this, but like it's sitting, I mean, up, who knows when this gets out, but like it's still sitting up on this website. Like, I mean, I have a clip of it and I transcribed it because that's the mentality, is that these are not humans. These are not families.
They never saw us as humans.
Yeah, I know.
They've never saw us as humans. Yeah, they've never saw us as humans. And that actually makes me really emotional because that really speaks to my experience as a Black parent. We're treated like we're not experts. We're talked down to.
I know.
All of that. And I'm not the one. I've never been the one. And so clearly at this time, I just pulled my kids out of schools like that, where I was disrespected and, this elitist. And I'm going to be honest with you, that kind of attitude, that elitist kind of stuff, what you just described, I've experienced that more with liberals I've not really experienced that with outright racist conservatives, because the outright racist conservatives don't want you in their schools in the first place.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead, because I really want you to get
I'm not
this.
saying that to make, but that's what we're talking, like when we talk about where's the role of academia, that's the role.
That's the role of academia, and they're so elitist.
And this part, like the apps that they were talking about later in other talks were PBS Kids apps. PBS Kids, right? So all of these things.
You know, I took my daughter off of PBS Kids when you told me that. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I said she can't get back. I said she can't get back on PBS.
But like they had this Daniel Tiger Tea Party app, and they said, "Look at, did you share your cookies? Did you share your cookies at the Daniel Tiger Tea Party?" And then they say, "Well, then they'll give you a nudge and say, maybe."
And she used to love that show, Daniel Tiger.
I tried to tell the community outreach liaison for our major NPR station here, who is, a Black woman, like an established Black woman, like, hey, I found this out. This is terrible. Like, y'all need to stop this. It's not going to be good for Black and brown kids to be on this app that's tracking their behaviors, with the cookies. And she just said, we all take the money. She said, we all take the money. And like, maybe I was the only one in the room who didn't have a job doing. And I'm not like, we're all in this machine, right? But like,
we're all in this machine. Yeah, if you got a pension fund, you in it.
Yeah. But then what we're talking about is it's so this country's built on that, right? Like that's the reality. But I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. So anyway, it's the shorting part. I haven't let me see. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go. A big piece of this, how do they make money on these bonds, is the securitization. So you can see we can securitize people now. This is at a gathering of Arizona State and Global Silicon Valley. They meet every year, and Arizona State is Michael Crow. This is from 2018. They have set up higher education finance with income sharing agreements. That's going to be what they're going to come up with in terms of talking about what comes next.
Income sharing agreements. So we got to share our income with people?
Yes, it's contracts, more contracts, and they will garnish your wages, and you will only be able to get certain jobs. Like, so only certain types of work will be funded. You will be able to only get support to do certain types of work to support the fourth industrial revolution. Like, I'm an art historian and I'm probably a pain in the ass. And so they don't want any more. There's going to be no income sharing agreements for art history students or novelists or actors or ballerinas. It's only going to be for coding and pharma and these things that they want to have happen. And then they're going to securitize the debt. So in this clip that I have, this individual from Purdue Research is saying, I expect in a couple years, we're going to have this giant opportunity to securitize all of this higher education debt. And what I will say is, like, through income sharing agreements, is that there's a huge push right now for college and career readiness, right? Especially for first generation kids and Black kids and getting college completion. This process is very much about driving into this new equity market. Okay. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't have a right to access the kind of higher education that helps them support their families and their livelihoods. But ultimately, they're looking to get as many people into this market so that they can maximize their profit on the debt. And I will say, so we have that was higher education. That was 2 years ago. So now they're framing everything as lifelong learning. And under lockdown, with so many people pushed out of work, there will be all of this reskilling, right? So adults who are no longer able to do, their job has gone away. They will need to be reskilled into the jobs to build the global digital jail and the cyborg transhumanist program. So that
you say that so casually. You need to stop. The global digital jail and the transhuman is what? This
cyborg
is crazy.
Agenda. I'm telling you, they're putting synthetic biology and everything. But I know you guys aren't going to be able to see this map that well, but I make these maps in Little Sis is the software. So this is the platform they're going to use to securitize the debt is called Edley. So that's in the center. And this guy, Christopher Riccardi, he co-founded Edley, and that's the software they're going to use to securitize all the income sharing agreement debt. And this first, there's a career impact bond program that's coming out of New Jersey. So the governor there, Democrat, It's these Democratic governors.
Oh,
He's
yeah, but the
former
governor of New Jersey. Oh, wow.
The 27 years Goldman Sachs, but super progressive. Trust me, okay?
He's so progressive. He's a Democrat.
He's going to set you up, and you can either do
and Black people voted for him 9 times out of 10.
Or coding. So you can go to a coding boot camp, and you can sign up for an income sharing agreement. And my concern is that it will become a welfare to work obligation, right? That these people, if in order to get a public benefit, they will have to be in workforce training, but it won't just be provided, it will be contingent on them signing up to have their wages garnished. And then this is really crazy. The New Jersey Impact Bond, Career Impact Bond, it's not just your training, but it is your wraparound services. An adult wraparound services. So maybe you can self-finance yourself with garnished wages for your childcare while you go to the coding boot camp. You know, I mean, and y'all know this. You know how this system.
Yeah, I've been on welfare before, and I think people who watch me or know me know that I spent time in the public system, and anybody that thinks that people who get public assistance love that and we want to just live like that. These people make their system complex and hard on purpose because they want you to give up. And I also saw, like, from a conservative perspective, how it was designed to actually keep you there. If you made 1 penny over, they would kick you off, even though you still didn't make enough to survive.
Yeah.
The way that they designed the system it was almost like, well, shit, I might as well just stay here if I can't go out and work and do all of this, because as soon as I go get a job, I'm going to get kicked off. But then my job don't pay enough for me to pay the rent and pay for childcare. I knew too many Black women in that situation. I mean, it's that way. But even like this idea of script and the company store. I mean, this is the company store, and then who is investing in you? Who owns that securitized debt? It's not just Goldman Sachs. It's the Vatican Bank. It's SoftBank in Japan. It's Jack Ma. It's whoever. Like, you're no longer. Who is Jack Ma for people who may not know?
He's the head of Alibaba in China.
And Alibaba is the Amazon of China.
Yeah. And so I will say, like, in this framing, there's already a pilot in Connecticut, which I will point out because the new Secretary of Education, I think that was just announced, he's from Connecticut, and he came up, someone through the system, right, who would be the perfect person to advance these wraparound services, I think, based on what
right?
Pardon me?
The community school wraparound.
The community schools and wraparound services, right? Because my understanding is he came from a low-income family, and he came up through, and now he's achieved, right? He's in his place, so he will be well positioned to advance such a program. But what it is that these wraparound services. So in Connecticut, there was actually a program for a pay for success deal. This was under the Obama administration, because opioid and the heroin crisis is part of all of this too. It's also addiction is another impact market. These women were flagged for substance use and child protective service. And that was, Yale created some sort of evidence-based solution. But the reality is the women in this program were predominantly single mothers making $10,000 a year in Connecticut. Okay, so their problem was really that they were not able to live and support their family in any meaningful way. But so this evidence-based solution was, you were coming in, you were getting parents to pee in a cup, you were monitoring, you were making them jump through all these hoops. And the investors would get paid for this, as long as, like, say, the results from their drug test got better on a dashboard. But at the end of the program, they're still only making $10,000. They're trying to live.
The investors are getting paid, but the families are not getting paid. They still get paid $10,000 a year. Yeah,
because it's an impact. They just want to improve their metrics, right? Like, they want to improve their drug treatment metrics, right? But it doesn't materially change their condition. And what I will say is, in this deal, among the investors in this deal was BNP Paribas Bank, which is a French bank, and QBE Insurance, which is an Australian insurance company. So essentially, the misery of these women and their children had become a global investment commodity. It wasn't even that their government was investing in them. It was like other random governments. Like, they were just part of somebody's portfolio. They were just like, there to balance somebody's portfolio as an impact. And the thing that's really important to know is, like, right now, BlackRock is pushing this narrative around ESG investing, environmental, social governance, social impact investing. They say, we're going to put all this money, and they're advising the EU on ESG
investing. You tell people who BlackRock is? Most people don't.
It's one of the largest asset holders in the world.
Yes, it is.
It's the largest asset, yeah. Massive amounts of money. And then Trump essentially sort of put them in charge of the Federal Reserve too. So, they have more money than anything. And now they're saying, oh, we're going to be sustainable and environmental, with our investments. But these investments could be, women with a addiction problem who, don't have enough money. And that's what I said. Like, when I went and I gave a talk about race and technology to a Unitarian church, very liberal church in Philadelphia. And, they've got the Black Lives Matter banner out front, and they want to do the right thing. And, but the pastor got really upset when I was pointing out all of these entities that were involved, because part of it is through the United Way, through this program called ALICE, Assets Limited Income Constrained.
I've heard of ALICE.
And that's a working poor. So the working poor are never going to get out, and they're always going to be tied into these arrangements. And I said, you're going to need, at some point, these churches are going to have endowments, that have a social conscience, are going to be investing. And what you need to know is, you need to say, our kids, is this money that's going into supposed social justice investments, are there kids on surveillance Playtables behind that? Like, what is that actually like? It's being branded as good environmental, social justice investments, but is it really? If it's paid for success, where is the power in that?
So is the Green New Deal, what about the Green New Deal?
It's a Trojan horse for all this.
It's a Trojan horse for this?
Yeah. Come on.
But AOC is for this. But wait a minute. These are all the people who are pushing for justice. This is going to be too much.
Well, that's what I'm just saying. Do they know about Edley? Like, I mean, I'm a mom in Philadelphia. I'm not trained in this. I know about it. Like, that's what I said when she first came out.
Yeah, you know about it. I ain't know about none of this shit.
Well, I said, does nobody tell her that Goldman Sachs has a whole green bond division? Like, she supposedly hates Goldman Sachs. Did nobody in her, brief her that, oh, by the way, Goldman Sachs has a whole green bond division. And by the way, all those people in Switzerland want to put a sensor on every tree so they can capture the cost offset. And and we hear there's a big order for surveillance Playtables. Nobody's because they don't want to know. They don't want to know. They don't want to actually look at it. I mean, maybe they do. I'd love it if she invited me up. I could give her the presentation. Maybe somebody knows her. They can send this to her.
So everything that we fighting for, because somebody had already said, what about the solution? Because you done told us everything we fighting for, we need to it's all tied up in this matrix.
Well, what I'm saying is keep people, and I'll talk about it later, but it shouldn't be an investment market.
All you're saying is that we can fight for these things, but it shouldn't be an investment market, and we should not
create global markets and investing in poverty. It's not a capitalist, that's not the answer. Letting rich people make more money off of poverty isn't the answer. I don't think. I mean, again, I said I wouldn't tell you what to do, but that I don't think that's the answer. So anyway, I was just going to say, so this guy, Christopher Riccardi, who created the, here he is, the platform, he was the grandfather of collateralized debt obligations.
Don't nobody know what that is. Collateralized debt obligations.
So that's what they use to short the housing market. So these are actual products. These things that they create in high finance, they're products. They create them contractually. He created this new product that was like, hey, here's a new way to gamble on this, these insurance products on the housing market. He crashed the last economy. He was one of the dudes from the movie, practically. They said he turned Merrill Lynch into the Walmart of CDOs.
And what's a CDO, please?
I think it's collateralized debt obligations. They said that is what he's known for. If you look him up, that's what it says. So the guy who set up the infrastructure to crash the last global housing market is now doing the same thing with reskilling poor people to build a digital jail. Tell me I'm the only person that didn't notice that.
I mean, regular people who are not investors or money people, which is most of us, I would not have began to know where to find this stuff. Allison.
It's
Like
just
you
in
said,
their LinkedIn, they brag about it.
on their LinkedIn.
Yeah, they don't expect anybody who'd be against it to look at their LinkedIn. Marinage, I love that, by the way. Yeah, so anyway, this is the structure. I am not making it up. I have mapped it. I make these giant maps. Most people only look over here, or they only look over here. Or they only look at, like you have a slice. Everybody, I went to Philadelphia has some great theater, a lot of small theater groups. And there was a small production called Ideation. And it was about it's a 1-act play with a bunch of people in a conference room. They were like McKinsey people. They get given a problem to how do you dispose of a whole bunch of bodies? And then they start figuring out, is this real? Are other people trying to also figure out this thing? And then they start thinking, what don't we know? We're given this small set of factors to make this decision, but we don't know the context. We don't know anything about the bigger picture. And that taught me a lot. Seeing that play, I'm because there's a lot of plausible deniability. I mean, and no offense, because I know we're all in it. I'm not pointing fingers, but I'm saying a lot of people only know a small slice, and there is no incentive, financial, social, in the United States, in a nation built on brutality, really, right, to know it. There isn't any incentive to actually really know it. And what I'm saying is that this moment that we're facing, all of the data that's being collected, it's not just about a global prison. Increasingly, it is potentially a global prison run by artificial intelligence.
There it is. That's where the transhumanist stuff comes in, the Neuralink from Elon Musk.
So we need to fight it, but it has to be fought. That's why in many respects, I think the emphasis on the partisanship, on the breaking down, on identity politics. And again, I'm not saying it from that there are very real things connected, but they want us to point fingers at one another and to not build a resistance against this machine.
Yeah, because divide and conquer has worked for centuries. I mean, Fred Hampton was, he was.
And I mean, I'm fine. I am not putting myself up as someone who wants to lead this thing. But I'm not going to align with the structure of people who I believe are intentionally or unintentionally advancing this program. So I've been pretty isolated because like I said, I'm not a normal person, but I know this. And if I keep telling it, I'll find the right people. And maybe some of you guys are the right people. So let me just see what else I got here. Okay. So these are just, I have a lot of slides, and I know we're going to want to have some more time, but this is this Pay for Success Panopticon. I know there's a lot of conversations around.
Oh, somebody getting ready to call you a conspiracy theorist. You got 5G up there.
No, it's so this is the Internet of Bodies. No, look up the World Economic Forum, the Internet of Bodies. Everything needs to run on real-time data. Actually, 6G is coming. I did not know about 6G.
I know, I heard 6G is coming.
My friend Joseph told me, and the digital twinning. But so this is, so these are different. So I will say, if you go back to the Zong, it's risk profiling. This is about, you even with the school shootings, you saw all the stuff about risk profiling kids. And I think, Black people know.
Oh, they got that in Maryland. My organization, my husband, we're fighting that in Maryland because they yes. They want the
threat score. What threat score are you
for? Yes.
What is your productivity, right? This is tied to Taylorism. Friedrich Taylor, who also did his experiments on manufacturing and efficiency in Philadelphia. That's why I have to tell this story. Are you compliant with your medical treatment? Diabetes, heart disease, obesity are all going to be tied into health impact markets. So are you compliant with your wearable technology? Are you doing your workforce career pathway? Are you improving your lot in that way? You can restrict your mobility. We can watch your social interactions. We can watch you in your house. We can watch your physical activity. Your phones are already doing that. We can look at your mind and your emotion, and we can actually get all the way down to your cells. So these are all, we have to understand that we are being mined for data and predictive analytics profiling, and that it connects with the 5G system, and that all of this data here, it is signals intelligence, and it is signals intelligence both for a military framing, okay, a social physics, predictive profiling socially, individually and socially about making predictions about social unrest, and it is also about making these data analytics for the impact markets.
And they have to do this because, like you said before, when you and I talked, increasingly these people are gaining more and more wealth. Number one, they're not paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing more and more austerity. So obviously it's more of us than there is of them. Yeah. And they know we're going to rise up.
Yep.
And this is them getting ready for it.
Yep. They got to get everybody trackable and predictable. Okay. So this will touch
please
a little bit
go back to that slide again, please.
What, the back?
Yeah, go back. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure. So digital ID, we didn't go through that. Internet of Bodies, United Nations, what is Agenda 21? Data harvest, human,
I know this is like a whole structure. We need, like, I told you, poor Shai, he did 4 hours with me the other day. So the digital identity is essentially the World Wide Web Consortium has been working for over a decade to develop interoperable data. So all of your data gets aggregated into one place, and likely, they're looking at it being blockchain. It doesn't necessarily have to be blockchain, but like a permanent record of all your information. So, remember that mother in Tanzania, the unborn child, like you could get put onto your digital identity before you're even born. And then it accrues afterwards. All of your interactions with your smart environments, your credentials, your health record, your schooling, your mental health care, your prescriptions, your parking information, your Easy Pass, like all of it can go into this digital identification. And I initially thought that the pilot would come through free college and the dual enrollment community college programs that are rolling out, because they're pushing blockchain transcripts. And I said, oh, they're doing that in Tulsa and Dallas. Like that's how it's going to start. It's going to start that if you want to do free college, then you're going to get this blockchain transcript, and that's going to be the first node. And then onto that, they can layer a digital wallet with all of these other, your food assistance, your housing voucher, once they get you on blockchain. But that certainly is only a small group, right? The people who would take advantage of early college, community college stuff. That's a very small percent of the population, relatively speaking. But if you have pandemic and you can use the threat of a national security state to essentially push everyone to get a digital identity, then that's a lot more people. And that helps you scale it a lot faster. Now, I will point out, and I don't have a slide of it here, but I collaborated with someone, and last summer, last year, she proposed a resolution that was passed in California and then at the national meeting of the NAACP that said that the NAACP membership would oppose any compulsory requirement to access a public benefit of creating a digital identity. So they said you should not have to have a blockchain identity to get food stamps, to access a community health center, to get subsidized pre-K. They should not make you do that. And what's happened, though, is that kind of went in a drawer. Like you can look at the 2019 resolutions for the NAACP. It's on page 62, and it's in there. And it was passed with overwhelming support. And we had no idea how important it was going to be.
Wow.
But nobody's really talking about that right now.
But
it's out there. It's out there. That precedent is out there, and it's very educational. It's like a page and a half, and it really laid out the case of why predictive profiling and using this data would harm the Black community. In terms of collecting all this data. So anyway, so that's digital ID. Internet of Bodies is essentially wearable technology and ingestible technology. Increasingly, they're going to put
ingestible technology.
Yeah.
What?
Like nano pills. I mean, they even have those now early, like you can do like gastrointestinal, like at little cameras and you swallow, but increasingly they're going to actually have nanorobotics or also sensors that they can put under your skin. So they're framing DARPA, which is the sort of mad scientists of the US Army. They partnered with a company called Profusa, and they're doing biosensors that they're framing as pandemic preparedness. So that's coming. Like this is only the first pandemic, right? This is going to be waves of pandemics, and they're going to increasingly colonize our bodies with devices and nanotechnology. But it could also be pills, that you're swallowing pills. Even though those bikes, you guys have those crazy, like sponsored bike shares, like that's Internet of Things. Like they know who biked when, how far up, if they went uphill, if they took the easy route. That's all Internet of Bodies, all of it. Like it all is aggregating the data. And I just realized that like a year ago, because I wrote a story about sort of laying out what this would be like. And I said all the people had to get old bikes that didn't have sensors on them. because the Internet of Things spikes were tracking everybody around. So the United Nations and Agenda 21, again, those are the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17. Most people, if you haven't looked at them, you would not know that only about 5 have anything to do with the environment. The vast majority, 2/3 of them, are about managing the global poor. And
which
so
is a hell of a lot of people.
It's a whole lot of people, but they're going to make money off that by making the impact market. And again, I talked a little bit about these predictive profiling in the futures, like that profiling. I mean, and that is something the Black community is very familiar with, is the profiling aspect.
Okay, yeah, we're familiar with that. Yeah.
So that's going to but imagine being profiled by AI. And I was actually at a meeting in Philadelphia a couple of years ago of the International Police Superintendents. Like our open data, like they're selling everybody on open government data portals is the most wonderful thing. But in our city, the people who lobbied for it worked for the police department. And then he spun off his own company that he used our city data to create predictive policing software. It was Acevea was the company and HunchLab was the software that he then sold back to the city. So like when people are like, this is so wonderful, open data. I'm like, yeah, but in Philadelphia, they made predictive policing software and sold it back to Philadelphia and East St. Louis and Chicago.
All in Black cities. All in Black
exactly.
cities.
So they're using our data to create profit, to monitor people. But in that meeting, there was someone who they were playing it really cool. Like it was like not a big deal, And, I was asking some pointed questions about the algorithms that would like capture the pharmaceutical companies pushing the heroin and not just the people on the corner. And like there was a veteran guy behind me and he had some pointed questions for them. But later, at the very last question, this guy raised his hand and he said, just so you know, the future of policing is artificial intelligence, facial recognition software, and drone surveillance.
Wonderful.
And then he was the CIO of the city, the chief information officer of the city. And then he wasn't like 4 months later. So that's what we're talking about.
So Democrats, just to be real clear, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Chicago are all cities that are Black cities where Democrats control the infrastructure of those cities. I wanted to repeat that.
So you're not going to be able to see this map itself, but this is I want to mention that what they need to do the profiling is interoperable data. And what interoperable data means. I was
about to ask you. Go ahead. Come on.
Everything has to touch. So even though we know this whole narrative is a fake out, like they are not interested in actually fixing people, because if they did, their market would dry up, right? Like if they actually fixed people and people got out of poverty, where would they put their money, right? So it's a fiction, but in order for it to justify on the equations for these deals, all of the data has to be in one place. That's the interoperable. So they have to say, if we gave you pre-K, you didn't end up incarcerated. If your pre-K data is held in a spot over here and your juvenile justice data is held over here and they don't touch, you can't even make that argument. If they're all in a big lake, then you can make the argument, whether or not it's a legit argument, but that you can make it. So they need everything all together. And
that's what remember I told you about my friend Marika in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. She's in the comments right now. That's what they did, and that's what they fought and won initially against, but you know that they're gonna come back around. But that's what they were doing in St. Paul.
They need all of it. They need the foster care data, they need the mental health data, they need the juvenile delinquency data, and the model for that is Data Zone in San Jose. They were piloting that on Black and brown kids in San Jose. That was the model with Chan Zuckerberg money. So our tax dollars funded it through the NSF. And then Chan Zuckerberg said, that's a good idea. We're going to scale that. And the Packard Foundation was also part of that. So they scaled Data Zone, which actually I think has like 300,000 or 400,000 kids into this new system. Anyway, I'll talk about it. But so HIPAA, which is the health records, is up to this point until they get the blockchain health care records, is much more protective of information than FERPA. So FERPA is like your student data in your school. And this is what is so problematic that people are not aware of, is that you are in a community school setting. If they bring welfare services, mental health services, telemedicine services into a school, HIPAA does not apply. it's FERPA that applies. And the FERPA is a lot weaker. So they can say, if you're acting on behalf of the school district in their capacity, you can use the data for these impact markets. And so whereas say you have a child that is having emotional difficulty, outbursts, if you took that child to a therapist out of a school, that information would be covered by HIPAA, which would be more protected. If you're doing some sort of online teletherapy in the school, that data is much less protected and can be used for these predictive profiling markets. And they're actually even developing things like digital pharmaceuticals and prescription video games for ADHD and all of these services that will happen in the school, but that helps them make the data more interoperable. So that is essentially what this clip is talking about, the data sharing. And then with Harris, like, as we know, she has a problematic record, right, around the truancy and incarcerating families around that. So, my concern, again, with the framing of social workers, not police, is that I don't want police.
That's my word. Counselors, not cops, baby.
Right. Well, and I think a school counselor may be different than a social worker, but if we know that they're making money off of putting people into programs, and sent that some investor is going to make money, the more families you can get into programs and not out of them, that the nature of control is still not going to be great. If what you do is, if the social worker, who might be a lovely person, I'm saying most of these people are lovely, but they ultimately, their job is going to depend on doing what the state tells them. And we know that it's going to, if you criminalize poverty and you threaten parents who are housing unstable with neglect, that's not going to go well. So, and I realize we're short on time. So like, I don't know, do you want to, like, we can always come back and talk again. I know you're.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to come back. I mean, yeah, but let's finish. Okay. So Kamala Harris in the carceral state, you connected that already, right?
Yeah. Let me, maybe I can just clip through a couple. Oh, so here it is. Okay. So here's my
the community schools, because that has been marketed to our community as the solution.
Well, so here's what I'm saying. So there's an entity, we are looking at digital pharmaceuticals markets. Okay, so we know that kids are going to be, whenever in-person school happens again, if it happens again, these kids are going to have a hard time, right? There's a lot for them to process, all the stuff that happened. And they're going to act out because it's hard. Like, we're all acting out. Like, even adults, even grown adult people are not acting in, they're having a hard time. So if you have evidence-based solutions, but that may be not about collecting data on these kids, especially about their mental situation, it's going to be tough. And then the question is, if you're bringing these services into the school, knowing that there are markets in them, knowing that people might be shorting, right? Like, some people might be,
Well, I don't think we know that. The people who are pushing.
No, they don't know. But what I'm saying is, like,
yeah.
What if you have a bundled thing in mental health services, and you put it in a hedge fund, and then later someone's going to say, well, I think actually more people are going to commit suicide. Like, that's the logic of this crazy machine. And that's what I'm trying to surface. Like, people don't know this. I'm not saying people know this. They don't know this. But Achille is a company that was developed out of Neuroscape Labs at UC San Francisco, where Chan Zuckerberg is. They spun it into a private company. They have just developed the first prescription ADHD treatment video game, pediatric video game by prescription for kids. So just picture that you have a kid that's coming back in school and having a hard transition, and they say, your kid is acting out. I need you to I'm going to write you a prescription for this Achille video game. Right? And then the parent says, I'm not really comfortable with that. Like, I prefer not. Well, then maybe they start looking into your other situation about your housing. Like, maybe, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that it may not be bad people, but if the machine is set up to try to criminalize poverty, to try to make money off of poverty, to try to make money off of harm, to collect this data, then there is no way, given the power differential, that it's going to come out right for poor people, for Black people and brown people. I don't think. Even if everybody has the best intentions, unless we start talking about it. And we could totally start talking about, I would love if every school social worker could say, you know what, I do not want pay for success, because this is embedded in the Every Student Succeeds Act. That was part of that. Like if every school—
This is embedded in ESSA. We worked on ESSA. We fought for ESSA, but I didn't remember hearing nothing about no damn pay for success.
It was for all of this. And this is what Harris is going to do. And this is what the guy who's like, and I'm not saying that people don't deserve to have health care and treatment and housing and all of this. But if you like, remember Paul Tudor Jones in the Robin Hood outfit. That's what I'm saying. When you see this, know that he's standing behind it. And the guy who shorted the British pound for billions of dollars in one day. It's not a fair game. Unless we unpack it within the context of the history. The educational process is a zone of extraction and surveillance. And it's no one person's fault. I mean, you know, I'm not, because I know probably lots of people are in it. It's not no one person's fault. But if we can't talk about it, what it actually is, what's going to happen to these kids and families? And there's going to be way more of them after the lockdown. I don't know. Maybe that's a good place to pause. I'm sorry I didn't get all of the ed tech. There's like way more of it. I don't know. I know your families. You need your family too. I'm terrible at like time management.
I just really appreciate you sharing all of this. I guess this is a time we can let the audience know, for people who's listening, if people have any questions. I know this is a lot. People have been kind of asking questions. This is a lot. And I wanted you to come on to talk about this because, you know, you and I have talked. You and I talked a couple of days ago for 2.5 hours. I said, you realize that you are breaking up everything that we as activists and people who, you know, want, you know, social good. And for me as a Black person who, you know, I'm tired of seeing Black people on the bottom of that pyramid that you showed at the beginning of this. I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe this is a good time for us to talk about what are some solutions to this incredibly sophisticated maze.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's what
there's
people
like
want to
choke
know.
points. Don't put kids on blockchain. Stop the interoperable data. I mean, that's why we did that.
And do we do that by massive non-consent, non-compliance, like disobedience? Like, I'm not doing none of this shit. So what are the consequences? I'm saying we can do this right now, right?
Yeah.
Like people can say, or people can ask, like, okay, is anybody getting paid off of this? And I imagine that the workers wouldn't know the answer to that. The workers, as you say, the worker bees who are doing all of this. But like, for example, in DC, the mayor and the council, there's only one Black councilman who represents Southeast, which is still majority Black, is one of the few majority Black parts of the city in Washington, DC, was the only one to vote against being able to immunize or vaccinate children as young as 11 without parents' consent.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Let me go
in Black cities.
Oh God, I didn't even get to any of this. Let me just skip through. I had a lot more stuff to go. Can I show you this real quick?
Yeah.
I think this is an important one to talk about. This is my model of so this is now, it's a thought experiment. So this hasn't actually been implemented, but the state of Illinois, again, commodities futures trading is based in Chicago and Illinois. They did a task force report on how they could use blockchain, and they actually did an early test case to do birth certificates on blockchain with a company called Evernym, which is in Salt Lake City. Which Salt Lake City has a lot going on there too with the NSA and also, you know, a lot of other stuff going on in Salt Lake City. But this idea is that this is food assistance. Okay, so this is SNAP. That you would set up a digital verification. So you would have some biometric attached to create a digital wallet for a person needing a public benefit. And then this person, when they went to the store, if they made the choice, the preferred choice or not, it would affect an incentive payment to their wallet. So if they bought the apple, they got a little money dinged back to their wallet. And if they got the hamburger, they did not. Okay. And so a lot of people would look at that. And this is about behaviorism. This is about token economies. But even though at the first people might say, well, I think people should be healthy. I think that's a good idea. And what I try to say is that they will.
It's not your choice to make people's choices for them. That's illegal.
I know. I'm not saying that, but I think like people who've never navigated this, right? They'll be like, well, I think people should eat apples. Well, so the thing is that there won't be a choice, because over time, knowing austerity runs this system, they will drop the benefit that you can only get to the end of the month if you always make the right choice. Suppose what they call the right choice. And who's making the right choice? Who's deciding? Well, that's Goldman Sachs. That's JP Morgan Chase. Someone else is deciding maybe that apple, in a few years is the apple with the vaccine in it, right? Because now they're growing vaccines in food and lettuce, right?
Wait, they doing what now?
They're growing vaccines in lettuce and
Where?
tomato in Mexico and here. Yeah. In West Philadelphia, I think. The lettuce one.
Okay.
I know, but and they have nudge bands where they take your DNA. So what if this comes with a nudge band, a scannable? So you have to scan all your food and it has to match your DNA, right? And they say, oh, well, you're pre-diabetic and you can only have the vaccine salad. That's what I'm saying, because this is the cyborg transhumanist program right here. So, but if you haven't navigated the system, you might not realize that, oh yeah, the plan is the government essentially going to undercut the benefit that you can only make the right choice if you want to eat all month, right? But this right choice assumes you have a grocery store in your neighborhood that you can get to, right? That you're not working 3 jobs, that you have a functioning kitchen, that you're not.
Are they going to criminalize people who grow their own food? Because that's a solution, is to grow your own food.
Yeah. Well, it's independent. So, but what I'm saying is this is besides food, because this is about behavioral economics. This could be anything. Think about this apple hamburger thing for educational curriculum. Do you want the government education, like evidence-based government education? Well, do you want the Black Panther curriculum? You're going to have to pay a premium on that. I'm sorry. I'm just saying, right? And then they're going to say, oh, well, you need a healthcare treatment. Well, you could have the evidence-based one, or if you want some alternative treatment, that's going to cost.
But so the solution is that people need to do for self. And I have to invoke Elijah Muhammad. I think I shared with you, my husband is FOI, and he, has been trained in the Nation of Islam. And I feel like I'm thinking about Amos Wilson, who was another scholar of mine, who always championed the fact that Elijah Muhammad was one of the greatest psychologists that Black people ever produced. And the reason why he said that is because he always preached do for self. Yeah. Stop depending on white people. Stop depending on the government. Do for self. But you have Black liberals and Black academics be like, well, we can't do for self. It's the government's responsibility. Well, if it's going to be this, because I'm one of those kind of people that's like, well, wait a minute now, we pay taxes. It is the government's responsibility. Yeah. But if it's going to be this, and arguably for Black people, we've never gotten.
I know. It's always been a social.
Yeah. It's always been some BS. But I just feel like massive, retreat. Like I don't know, go, I don't know, move to the South, get out of the cities where you boxed in, where you on top of each other and you can't grow a garden and you need and have your own something. I mean, they can't what about the Constitution? Not that the Constitution.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Think about the 9 people in slavery at Washington's house. It was always a broken compact. That's what I'm saying. To me, the most amazing thing would be somehow if we had a do-over because it was never right. But we've got to keep people off blockchain, and that's what's coming. This common pass that people are hearing about with the airport transport, then Heathrow.
I've been seeing that.
So this is the Rockefeller Foundation. Remember, I said Judith Rodin set this all up for the Rockefeller Foundation. This is going to be the digital wallet, okay? So that they're framing it like people are like, well, maybe that's not so bad. I could do that just to get on a plane. But what they're not telling you about is these other 2 products that they've already developed, and they've said that they're going to develop all kinds of other data-based products, is this COVID check, which is your access to education and employment, and then also this real-time bio monitoring. And this is why I'm talking about the nanotechnology. Early on in the pandemic, there was a guy who's the CEO of the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, And he actually said, and this was when nobody could get tests, they said, I think people should be tested every day, every person every day. And people were thinking, this man is out of his mind. What is he thinking? Nobody has any tests right now. But this guy in St. Louis, who's actually also on the head of the United Way USA, okay, so Alice, he knows, he's got all the information. A couple times down the line by like COVID 2023, they're going to have biosensors in you that are resonating to the 5 and 6G that are transmitting your real-time data. So imagine like, and I didn't even get to this part, but like the world is this mixed reality video game. And the video game, this is being set up at Cornell Technion. In again, this is Bloomberg set this up.
This is New York right now.
This is New York. Yeah, this is Roosevelt Island. So this is Cornell Technion. They have ed tech and small data lab for health data analytics. So that's going to be what's going to run the digital prison. The biocapitalist prison is being incubated here in New York with the hedge funds under the oversight of the hedge funds. They're putting kids on blockchain in San Diego, Chula Vista, which is just outside of San Diego, a blood test. So they're already putting these children for face-to-face school, getting their blood and putting it in an electronic health record tied to blockchain already. So this is already happening. And anyway, yeah, let me see if I can get to Michael. Oh, I must have missed it. I guess I was going to talk about like Michael Crow. People are not familiar. Oh yeah. So here he is. So this is what I want to say is I was trying to explain it to my friend Lynn in Dallas, like a short version. I said, imagine if they remade the world as a mixed reality video game. So picture Pokemon Go, right? Only the people who made it was the CIA and the defense sector. And with the MBAs, the Harvard and the Stanford and the Wharton, and they made, and to profit the hedge funds. And then the nonprofits and the faith communities were running the dungeon masters. Because that's what we're looking at. And it's this augmented reality world. That's what Pokemon Go was. And people do not know that Niantic, which
I remember when people was doing that.
Gilman Louie was backed by In-Q-Tel. And In-Q-Tel is the venture capital arm of the CIA, which the founding board chair for forever and ever is Michael Crow. And Michael Crow was with Arizona State. You remember the EDLI, the securitization of people with the income sharing agreements, and all the ed tech is all coming through the CIA.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. That makes me feel so safe.
Well, I mean, people got to know though, like, how are you going to, I feel like the education process, but it's so much unlearning, right? I mean, and even y'all, not, like you had
my daughter's never going back to school. We pulled her out because the virtual learning just wasn't working for her, and we're homeschooling. Ain't no way in hell.
But this is what I'm saying. This is what they want school to be, is this ecosystem of self-organized playlists that could include school, but also not. So, they want people wandering around doing Pokemon Go education, but they're still going to get the data. And
wait, go back to the future of learning. Go back to that slide.
Yeah. So this is the learning ecosystem model, and this is
community-based learning plus cyber education. That's what the COVID is getting ready to have us doing.
Yeah. And I was looking at this 4 years ago. I mean, this is from 2013, and my husband said that's never going to happen.
Your husband said it's never going to happen. Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know. It looks like it's happening. But what I'm saying is, if the thing you're navigating is a CIA video game, how's that look for Black and brown folks? And this is the other piece, the voucher. There's a lot of folks who say, I'm just out of this game. I'm out. Not doing nothing, none of this. Well, the conservatives are fine with that because they're like, this is great. Look here, let me give you a digital wallet. Right? Here's a digital wallet you can use to check in at all of your Pokemon Go education places. So all of the traditional unschooling places that like more conservative, not virtual school, but people who are really doing like books and paper and going to the library. Our library is in on all this. Our library, they're throwing out books. They're putting in screens. They put a cooking kitchen in, which not that I'm against cooking, but why do they have it in the library? Well, they have it in the library because they're going to go and they're going to track kids' social behaviors and figure out like how to data mine them for who's the leader and who's the follower and who's the rebel and whatever in the cooking kitchen under the guise of healthy eating. But you're going to have your digital wallet that you can check in at the library and certify that you've earned a badge. because the Girls and Boy Scouts are all in on this too. So like you what I'm saying is like, I mean, I agree with you that you have to do for self, but people have to understand, even if what you're doing is doing for self within the existing construction, they've got it all, like they locked it in, unless we actually refuse to allow the government through these public-private partnerships to outsource, our benefits and to put us as a digital commodity.
This makes me think of Howard Zinn and the moving train. This is a train that's been moving and it's picked up speed since COVID. How do we put a wrench in the gears?
I mean, to me, I feel like we can't get these kids on blockchain. Like, we have to stop the digital wallet. Like, if they give you a digital identity that it tracks your biometrics. Okay, like, so maybe you have one, but like once they have your retinal scan or they have your fingerprint on this, and this is for kids because they cannot give their consent.
They're not. No, but they passing laws though. You think they're gonna stop at the vaccination?
We're living in a state of exception. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's why, to me, like, beyond the experience of enslaved people, that this is about the same thing that we did to indigenous people. You make a deal, you say we'll treat you one way, and then you totally renege on all of it, and then you just create your own rules to be whatever is convenient for you as the government, the U.S. government. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the history matters. The history really, and not just in a superficial way. I mean, structurally, the way this stuff is running now, it's running this way because it's built on this history. It actually, and some of it, I have to say, like this idea of hypothecation, which is how, like, when they moved enslaved people from the Chesapeake to Louisiana to the sugar canes, like when they stopped the transatlantic slave, but they were still, kept the domestic, that there were financial transactions that happened because the currencies weren't the same. And that is what the liberal New Yorkers played. The liberal New Yorkers were the facilitators of that entire thing, even though they claimed that they were good. And they were not. So that's Paul Tudor Jones. And that is pulling money out of bodies that you own. And that is exactly what these income sharing agreements are. It's the next version of that. It's and blockchain is going to replace the third party, the trusted third party. That's what blockchain is going to do, because soon it will be all automated. There won't even be people.
It's going to be AI. And I've heard Elon Musk said that AI is going to get to the point where humans will not be able to control it. That was scary to me. Yeah.
That's what I mean, I don't know if folks had seen, like, Black Mirror is total predictive programming for this. And I hadn't seen it when I first started talking about this like 3 years ago. And I was sitting down with some teachers, like justice teachers in New York. And they're like, that's like the Black Mirror episode Nosedive. And this woman falls afoul of something, and then all of a sudden, like, her whole life falls apart because the technology stops her from doing anything because her credit score keeps dropping. So, but I'm not giving up, because, like, to me, what is happening is a battle of spirit.
Yes.
I mean, it is a fundamental battle of spirit, and it's a battle in which I do not believe most of the world would want to see this happen. This is anti-life.
It is.
And I believe, this is going to sound goofy, but, like, there are in the world of physics and string theory and quantum computing, that these people that run the military, they have access to these things. And I do believe that, like, from a space of faith and spirit, that there is stuff happening that we are not aware of, that if you put your good intentions out and you do right, that it matters. Even if the odds seem incredible, that it is, like, this is our time. If we can see this, it is our time. And, like, I mean, to me, again, the most beautiful thing would be if we could address the doctrine of discovery, right? If we could, to surface that.
Can you remind people what the doctrine of discovery is?
Is when the papal bull that said we could take any non-Christians, we could take their bodies, their families, their lands under that enabled that mass theft of life. That's been riding through all of this for so many centuries. And that that white folks could back you up. That we could try to make it right. Not that any of it's easy. I'm not trying to say it's simple or easy or anything, but that we have the right to try to make it right for all the kids. So anyway.
Right. No, this has been great. The comments have been very engaging. There is a comment from Maria. She said, I wonder if that company is working with the Vatican in regards to the birth certificates.
So the Vatican is a key player. I mean, imagine, so all of the people who are holding vast pots of capital, your pension funds, everything, it's the Vatican Bank is a major player. So the Vatican Bank has had 3 impact investing conferences. There was one in 2014, 2016, and 2018, and they were in cooperation with the Mendoza Business School at Notre Dame. Okay, so it is very connected. In fact, many of these impact deals are coming through the Jesuit universities. So Georgetown was a major player, like very close with the Obama administration. The social impact bond deals out of Santa Clara were coming out of Santa Clara University, which I think Newsom is a graduate of Santa Clara University, Gonzaga and Spokane. A lot of and actually in Philadelphia, the pay for success deals in housing are coming through Project Home, which is a Catholic housing service. And the head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve is on the board of the Catholic Relief Services.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is connected. So Pierre Omidyar of eBay, because a lot of this is also tied in with home visits. It's not just school. They went in people's homes. They want to they're actually going to weaponize all of social determinants of health and like health disparities for Black women giving birth. Like all the stuff that is true will be weaponized in ways they want to get in your home. But Pierre Omidyar is part of that. And he's based, in the Bay Area. So he was a key sponsor of the Vatican Impact Conference. And they're doing good ID. They want a universal good ID and a lot of ed tech. So, these people, I mean, the Pope has said he wants to solve poverty with AI, right? And he's very tight with Microsoft. So, I mean, my thing is like for every entity, right? Like there's the Vatican Bank and then there's the Plowshares movement. Like there's the Barragans, there's Liberation Theology. There's no box, like whatever identity politics box people might want to be put in. There's no box that is full of all the good people and other boxes full of all the bad people. Like that is what I've come to realize is like we should put ourselves out with what our values are, and like attracts like. And sometimes it's not the people you expect. In fact, for me on this journey, and I will admit I'm late to the game. I'm catching up. Like I'm not by any means saying I'm the best at this. I'm trying, but the people who taught me and who I thought would be with me in this haven't been there, actually have rejected me. And people who were very unexpected, a lot of people of faith, people who might identify as conservative, even when I tell them this is racial capitalism, they are. So I'm saying like the people to face this, you almost have to be willing to deconstruct yourself.
Wow. You've already had me on that journey, because when you told me about reparations, well, if you want reparations, it's going to be connected to blockchain. I said, excuse me.
Well, they're not saying it yet, but how could
I know they ain't saying it, but I'm saying like, damn, we can't even get reparations, Medicare for all. And so now it's like for people who are advocating for those things, we also have to be like, but it can't be on blockchain. Yeah, but y'all can't do this.
Exactly. It can't be an impact market. It can't be wearable technology. Yeah.
It can't be wearable technology.
Yeah.
Y'all can't force us to take a pill that you're going,
you're not putting our business on surveillance Playtables. Because they're doing that in North Tulsa right now. 100th anniversary of the race massacre, and Michael Bloomberg and George Kaiser, and they've got Head Start kids on surveillance Playtables in North Tulsa. This stuff is symbolic. Like it matters. The choices that they're making, that they would pilot UBI in Jackson, Kellogg would pilot UBI in Jackson, matters. That South Carolina is the home visit pilot for the home visits for women on Medicaid. That matters. That it was Harlem Children's Zone. Right? Like that matters.
You really F me up with the Harlem Children's Zone. Like I had already heard like from people who are like, I guess what you call on the political left, people are clear about the vouchers. People are clear about charter schools, but people don't seem to be or weren't as clear as you explained about FERPA and how if you bring all these services in a community school and that's how you solve these issues so that we're not defunding public education and privatized education. What you're saying is everything is about to be privatized.
Yeah, everything. And it's about the data. So I will say, like someone shared an article with me last week that was about a food pantry in a high school in Houston, I think. And I guess kids could use the you had a certain amount that you could use in the food pantry, but then you could earn more scrip kind of to use in the food pantry by good deeds. Right? And so we're already conditioning kids in the school setting that if your family wants to eat these, positive behavioral PBIS tokens, well, you better be on your best behavior. But to what end, right?
Social emotional learning.
Right.
So they weaponize social emotional learning too?
Oh, yeah. I got the equation. I didn't get to that one. Let me see.
You got the equation?
I got the equation. I got you. Let me tell you, I got a lot of stuff. Sorry, here's the equation. It's quality. It's from Teachers College, Columbia. Here, look at this. Look at this craziness. Nubian VR. They're going to capture everybody's senses. Is that symbolic or what?
That's a black girl.
Yeah, it's in Africa. It's UNICEF. They're crossing out their eyes. Look at that. That's like Freemasonry, I have to say. Like some of that stuff is really bad. I mean, it's all really bad. This is all the data capture they're going to get off the virtual reality. People don't know this. They're selling Google Cardboard as like these wonders. Look, you can go take a field trip to the Amazon. Nope. They want your heart rate. They want your motion sensors. They want your task completion, your eye focus. They want to know all of it. This is the equation.
This is for social emotional learning.
Yeah, that's what they look like. So it's the intervention. I think what they say is you get 11%. The economic value of social emotional learning. Funded by the Novo Foundation. The Novo Foundation is Peter Buffett, Warren Buffett's son.
Yeah, Warren Buffett's kids. Novo Foundation funded this.
Yeah.
But they're progressive. But they fund liberal causes.
But what I'm saying is, like, I didn't fully appreciate the history. Look at the history of social progressivism.
I know Marimba Ani already told us.
I mean, it's not that
I'm messing with you.
They want people to identify with a group, right? And what I'm saying is we can't go, like, you need to know the backward part, but the answer isn't back there. At least not in this country. It's not back there. I mean, not as a community. I mean, I'm not saying not to call on your history of struggle or elders or like, I mean, yeah, but like the answer to like go back to hearken to some better progressive age, it wasn't that.
Cost of interventions, benefits during intervention, benefits youth. I'm not a math person. Is this calculus? What is this?
Yeah, this is how they just, so this is, okay, so I will say that the photo at the very beginning.
For whoever's watching, if you're a mathematician, math person, please tell us what kind of math this is. Go ahead.
So can I tell you about the social, I think I told you already on the phone maybe, but so I went to the Dirksen Senate building, that event that I was at, and that photo of me standing, I got the very first question because I'm pretty good at this. So I said, listen, I'm pretty concerned about these social impact bonds tied to social emotional learning. I hear that you guys are talking about these. And the kindergarten, the special education ones, the kids in pre-K are tracked for a couple years, right? But then they go to kindergarten and it's either they got special education or they didn't. And then they stop being tracked, right? They get off being tracked because that's the cutoff is did they need special education in kindergarten enrollment? What happens if you use social emotional learning in a middle school population? And the cost offsets to that are addiction or incarceration. Okay, so you've screened a bunch of middle schoolers that you think would be a benefit to this, you benefit from the social emotional curriculum, and it's tied to a social impact deal, but the cost offset is addiction and incarceration. So when do they stop being watched? That's what I asked them. I said, I mean, do you stop when they're like 25, 50, 70? Like, when do these kids not have to be monitored for? And like, how would you even do that? Except now now I know you put it on blockchain, right? As soon as you have blockchain, they scan you in if you're 65 and they'll say, oh, here's your permanent record. We saw when you were, 12, you got a social emotional thing. Some company gets a payment. Or doesn't get a payment. But like, I asked them this question to the panel. These are all Obama people who set this up. This was the guy who set up the Pay for Success Finance in South Carolina. I said, tell me, like, that doesn't seem fair. Maybe this kid would never have even done anything. And again, that's presuming that it's fully an individual choice that you end up in that circumstance, right? Which we know it's not. It's often a structural choice. And they didn't really have a good answer for me. But after the whole Q&A session was done, I had 3 consultants run up to me with cards saying that they could come up with an equation. They didn't understand that I was saying that was reprehensible. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the education system right now is training people up to think that's okay. And, I thought I was being a good parent and try to get my kid in the right school and do all the things and be the achievements and da, 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 da. And at the end, I realized this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And so if what success means is that your kid is the overlord, how freaking success? That's not success. That's a horror show, because that'll kill your soul.
Yeah. Marika says, say more about the Harlem Children's Zone and the data collection. I guess you wanted to connect what you meant by the Harlem Children's Zone and the connection to all this said.
Yeah. Well, I have a series that's like that I wrote about the Harlem Children's Zone and the ties to Goldman Sachs. And like, it's really instructive. I have the link to that book of all the equations.
Lord have mercy.
Because really what they needed was a test bed to get all of the data analytics together. Because again, it's about running the game. And none of this game has scaled yet, right? There's still
it's about to.
Like what they needed was digital identity, and they didn't have it. And I still sort of hope that digital identity will wreck. Like, some people are like, there's no way blockchain will scale at this level. There's no way the smart contracts are going to scale at this level.
Well, Biden just won the election, and so that's what they're getting ready to come in and do.
Well, that's the thing. Delaware is a center of blockchain. Delaware is the blockchain state. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's why Biden was selected. Now it makes sense. Got it.
I know. That's why when that guy cut me off at the end of the other interview, that's what I was going to say. He wouldn't let me say it. Delaware is a center for blockchain and electronic health records. They did an early blockchain health record pilot because, as much as I'm talking about education, this is all about also social determinants of health. That's what's coming.
So Black people have been coerced to vote for their re-enslavement. But you say Trump is on this too.
Yeah, it's bipartisan. Trump's role in all of this is to inflame everyone so that everyone will retreat to their corners and double down. Okay. We're doing that. We doing that real good. Yeah. He's really excellent at it. He's pretty good at that job. He's good at that part of his job. in the larger Davos crazy billionaire plan, that's his job, and he's doing it.
But Biden has been marketed because the marketing from the media is that Black women save the country, Black people save democracy. Yeah. And I kept wondering why they kept talking about us. Like, why are we getting made the heroes?
But that's the thing. People deserve to have a social contract, right? Like, people deserve, like, I'm not, this is the other piece. Like, there are a lot of people who are like more libertarian free market that are interested in what I'm saying, but I'm like, you realize the free market is going to be in impact commodities, and it's going to be Peter Thiel and Palantir who's investing in these. It's going to be the big L libertarians. It's not that you're going to have your own small town and run your little blockchain town and have your own little small thing. This is going to be run by crazy billionaires in AI. And the free market is going to be in toddlers. It's going to be your kids too. So, what I'm literally saying that this is something that is a unifying factor of everything. And my preference would be that everyone would understand it as the history, the logical conclusion of enslavement and genocide, indigenous genocide and land theft. And if we could get there, like, again, not to get there by just shaming people into inaction, because that's not helpful. Like, literally, if we just shut people down and say, don't do any, that's not helpful. But like, mobilize people into, like, we can leverage this into a sacred struggle for all of humanity, and not just humans, all beings, because these crazy people want to put everything on blockchain. The stuff that they have been doing to great white sharks and the cougars and those like tracking mechanisms, that's us.
I remember when you made that connection, that I was on my walk listening to you one day. I was outside walking, and when you said they've been doing this to animals for decades, they've been tracking animals. You was like, and they've been herding animals, And that's what they get ready to do to us. That shit made so much sense when I said, what? Because you're right.
Like nobody told me about Operation Paperclip. That like after the Second World War, like the Soviet Union and the US were fighting for the Nazi scientists. So we brought a whole slew of them over and put them in charge of the space program.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Like if the global digital jail is run by satellites and 5G from space.
It is, because Elon Musk is getting a lot of money from NASA. Not just Elon Musk, but I don't know if because you know a lot about the financial markets. As I think I told you, I've been studying the financial markets to figure out how to make some money, but this is terrible. One of the things that I found out is that Virgin Galactic is also in space.
Oh,
and he's somebody from, what's the man name that owned that? I can't remember his name. It's another white man. But you were saying that if you can control people from space or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's impossible.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to leave this live today because it's very informational and lots of people are still hanging in there with us. We've been on 2.5 hours and we need to wrap up because I need to know you need to get back to your family. But again, they haven't, like you are like a prophet. Like you're telling people like, this is what's coming. Here are the dots. Here are the white papers that you can go read from the World Economic Forum. Tell us who Davos is again. DAVAS? DOS?
Oh, Davos. So the World Economic Forum that is really behind all this is the most powerful interest. They gather every year in Davos, Switzerland. And so Davos is kind of like my short version for these elite entities. But again, Switzerland is the head of, like, it's the center of banking, secret banking. It's the center of CERN. It's the center of the United Nations, like Geneva. It's, the World Economic Forum. The blockchain crypto valley is in Switzerland too. So there's a lot going on in Switzerland that like is not just chocolate bars. It's a lot. And I mean, I'm not even getting into the deep state stuff. This is all just the surface stuff.
Oh, this is all just the surface? Jesus Christ, man.
But literally, like, I don't think, like, so I went, I spent had a gift of spending some time like on Lakota land this summer. And I was working on this garden and I met someone, and who was sharing some teachings, Lakota teachings. And they said, we got to pray. This is somebody I didn't even know, like we just met.
That's what Black people
we
clicked too.
Like you and I clicked, right? Like she said, this is big, like for the creator, like we got to pray. And she had been in the nonprofit world for 20 years and realized, and then just had to step out. And she said, this is bigger than any of us. So we got to pray about it. The creator wants us to pray, and I don't believe that the creative force of the cosmic force of the universe wants us to all become, slaves to AI. I don't think that, it's anti-life. I don't think that that's what, but we have a responsibility to do what we can do in our path to disrupt that. And those of us who are in more privileged positions need to do that more. So that's why I'm here tonight, because I know what the stakes are. I mean, I know what the stakes are. There's no sitting on the sidelines in this game, and it's going fast.
It's speeded up. It's been accelerated. That's why I said it's a moving train. I just want to say this because I know, as Black people, as African Americans, and as you mentioned, Indigenous people as well, like we have a history of survival and thriving, and we have always come up with creative ways in what have seemed to be insurmountable circumstances.
Yeah.
And I feel like what you're describing here is that like we need some 21st century Harriet Tubmans, right? William Stills, as you know, in Philly. And I mean, we're going to break it open at some point. Like, I don't want people to listen to this and feel hopeless, because we come from a lineage of people who were able to figure out how to get free and how to get free from chattel slavery.
Yeah.
Right. We can argue about the fact that it continues to evolve.
Right.
But the horrificness of chattel slavery doesn't exist on the same scale that it had.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's how I want to like end this. Like I want to end on some kind of hope. I don't want people to feel hopeless, because I feel like a lot of this, people are like, okay, I ain't never heard of none of this. What is all, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like, yeah, and like I just feel.
And you don't necessarily have to know all of it. Like I mean, like I said, you guys know that you've been screwed over for a long time in different ways, but it's getting more intense.
Right.
And
right, the underground.
But I would love to be like, I don't know. And like, I have a hard time navigating my space in this because I can't cling on to other people's journey. You know what I mean? So my friend said, I was talking with him and he's like, you're a Jeremiah. Mm-hmm. Like, so I'm here to tell you the Babylonians are coming. I don't know where I'm in all of this. I don't know that these skills of mapping this thing are going to do me a darn bit of good when it really comes down. But I want you guys to know enough to make a good choice, an informed, strategic choice. Because, that's the thing I learned when I did testing, that fighting the standardized testing is like, I helped them. I didn't know what the next step was. So a lot of the work that I did actually led them into transitioning to the next bad thing.
Yeah.
And we were carrying their water and we didn't know. And so there are many, many, many things on paper look and sound good and are being represented as the justice you deserve. And it's not that.
Yeah. And you got me. I'm usually skeptical of white liberals anyway. And
I'm saying you don't have to trust me. Like,
no, I'm
like,
not talking about
not
you.
But I'm just saying,
I'm talking about when you said the next best thing. Like, I'm usually not one of those kind of people. Like, yeah, I don't know about that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about like, yeah. I feel like somebody said it earlier about the billionaires on the left are fighting the billionaires on the right, and it's still, and then both of it is BS for the people.
Yeah.
This has been great, man. This is, I don't know if you have like a final slide or a final like comment. You're definitely coming back. You got too much of, you didn't even get through all of your slides.
I'm going to do a thing with Sarah G, I think on Saturday about wellness, because that's a whole nother thing. I did 4 hours on Israel. This is like a mapping the world. Let me just go through and see if I have any other good ones. That's God's the world. Oh, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Just yeah. I'll just leave on people analytics. This is my town, right? This is Wharton. They're going to use a tablet to track this little kid's face and to capture their emotions for their people analytics. Like that's, and we're better than that. We got to try to be better. Like I gotta say no on that. And I'm grateful. I'm really grateful to have all of your time. And I would love to learn from you. Like there's so much of the history I don't know. But I think we could build something. Like, I don't know. I have gratitude. Like I said, I have gratitude that this work is on our hearts. And it matters. Our choices matter. Like in this moment, our choices seriously matter in a way that we could never have imagined. Even, this time last year, we would not imagine we would be in this position. Yeah,
basically, we don't need to agree to nothing. We need to just have complete disobedience to whatever's coming down the pipe, I feel like, because, and I also listen to other like spiritual like teachers. I think I introduced you to one of them. I sent you his video. He's in the UK, Infinite Waters, Ralph Smart. I don't know if people listen to him, but he has about 1.8 million followers on YouTube, and he comes off as weird and quirky and stuff. But one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is that people have to refuse to consent, and that, it's our right to like, he actually said that and I'm not saying this to scare people, but he predicted, and I think I might have shared to you, he is a light worker. That's what you call it. He's a light worker. And he predicted in 2019 in one of his December videos that in 2020 that the shutdowns and things like that he didn't predict COVID. He didn't use that language. He just said that the way that the world is now, he said that, right? And then for 2021, one of his predictions is he is saying that we need to grow our own food and learn how to live off of 1 meal a day. Now, 1 meal a day also goes back to Elijah Muhammad. He wrote an entire book about that.
Wow.
And I made the connections.
Yeah.
And he said we need to learn, because there is going to be, and this is going to get conspiracy theory to people because you can't quantify, you can't prove it until it happened, is that there will be a manufactured food crisis. And food has been used, has been weaponized in the past. We know that. But one of the things that made me think about that, because he said the manufactured food crisis before I found out there was 250 million farm workers on a work strike in India.
Yeah. I mean,
that's going to affect the global food markets.
Yeah.
I made that connection on my own.
Right.
And then Ralph said that before they went on strike. I don't think he knew, like, oh, India's going to set it off.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's not going to set it off, but he hasn't been wrong. I've been listening to him for several years. He has had his page for a while, and you have to be one of those kind of people that are this open-minded enough to receive the information. You can clearly dismiss him, say he's quirky, but Ralph has been on the money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, and for me, like, me and my family, my husband and I have been talking, I'm taking that information. When all this shit popped off, I was just like, I forgot he said that this was going to happen. Like, I was like, okay, now I need to, like, get out of this big city area, DC. I need to find somewhere where we have some land. We need to grow our own food. We need to learn how to live off 1 meal a day. Like, all of these things, right?
I saw Marinage, a couple people, or at least talking about
Maroonage, Marinage, Maroon societies,
yeah. I mean, it feels like that's
it.
That's it.
Yeah. So, can you tell people where they can find you? I see people in the comments are like,
sure. Wrench in the Gears. I should have picked a better one to just like wrench, like the tool, and in the gears.com. And then I do have a YouTube channel. It's not like fancy or anything, because it usually just was videos that I put on my blogs. But I've had a lot of interviews like this, and so if it goes on YouTube, I have a queue, and that's just Alison McDowell YouTube. It's not fancy. I've realized in all of this is that I don't make money at this. It's not my job. I'm not looking to write a book or anything. And then so
that's important, because one of my friends was like, "Who funds her?"
I don't take any money. Actually, I will say, and if you could put in the link, is that so the person that I connected with, who was in South Dakota, who's Lakota, like, she had left and was like growing a garden and having chickens. So I did a webinar once, and I said, I don't want money, but if people, like, I'll split it and give it my money to her. So she has a Venmo, so maybe if anybody is in a position of feeling like a holiday cheer, supporting an Indigenous woman on the land, like that's how I try to direct things. But I'm just doing this because this work has been put on my heart, and I have to say, I've been blessed finding amazing people. Like, that is the blessing, is the people. Even if we have to be digital, there've been beautiful people that I've found through this. So that's been a gift. That is a gift. What's her Venmo? You know what? I have to double check. Yeah, I don't want to give the wrong thing. It's fine. Yeah. I think it's at Chaz_Jewett1, but I'll have to double check. Okay, it's no problem. We can certainly put that in later, and I can put it in the description of the video, because I'm sure this video will get shared tons of times. I'm shocked. This is Christmas Eve, and we had 40 to 50 people staying with us and rocking with us almost the whole time. Oh. And the comments have never stopped. I mean, this is our job. This is the task at hand, right? It's the task of the world, of the sacred and the profane. That's profane.
Yeah. And you're right. There is a higher power. My husband reminds me of that all the time. These people are not omnipotent. These white people and these damn oligarchs and stuff and all this shit they're creating, they're not omnipotent.
No.
You know, they're not all powerful. There is a higher power. And I think that African indigenous wisdom, we know that. One of the things I have to point this out, a friend of mine who is a professor down at Clark Atlanta University, he shared this meme from 2019. It was like, oh, that aged well, where they had this map of the world of the countries who could most handle a pandemic or endemic, right? And it had Africa as all of Africa as the least able to handle a pandemic, and all the white and Western countries as the most to handle a pandemic. And look at what happened in Africa.
Yeah.
And look at what happened in the West.
We have to unlearn. I mean, and because that's the split. Like what's coming now is between mechanistic, engineered scientism, which is the supposed enlightenment, which is anything but enlightened, and that which is looking at nature and connectedness and earth, and like connected to the earth and to people. And that's, you know, it's not this partisan stuff they're cooking up. It's going to be ultimately which path. Is it the cyborgs, or is it you know, being
transhumanist nightmare? When you come back, we got to talk more about the actual transhumanist part, like that. I feel like that's going to create a lot of interest with people. Like when you come back, we want to like really dig into that. There's just so much to cover, and I just want to appreciate you. I just appreciate the fact that you're in a position where you can do all of this independent research. You have the time, and you've dedicated your life to like spreading this information and partnering with people who are open-minded enough to listen and to get this out to their communities. Yeah. Right.
I've been waiting to have, I mean, mostly I'm like, you know, I'll tell other white people not to put people on block. You know, I haven't had the opportunity till now to really speak to directly to communities, but people need the information.
Yeah.
Because
right now people believe that blockchain is actually the freedom. That's the liberation.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, because I think that came up and I forgot to mention it.
It did come up, yes.
So MIT, which is behind the digital currency initiative and a lot of the blockchain technologies, has developed something called Enigma. And it's on blockchain, and it allows them to query, to make us a search, to query and do data analytics on encrypted data. Okay, so that's what people are not realizing, is that MIT, which is behind impact and is the technology part, working with Harvard on the impact investing, this Enigma software that they have developed to allow them to, it stays private. So you can continue to be private, but what it means is the world still has to shift to data-driven services. So owning your data on blockchain won't stop teletherapy. It won't stop making your kids go to school online. It won't stop telemedicine. It's not going to stop any of the ways in which social welfare services are privatized and you are turned into data. You just can keep it. And my sense is that people who are on public assistance will have their data queried privately, or they may even be allowed to sell their data to be able to top off their small UBI payment, which we all know that this UBI is not enough to live off, right? So my thought is that blockchain, how this will go is, even if you have a blockchain identity and you're a super rich person, you'll never have to open your data. But if you're a poor person, you know, you're going to have your social welfare services queried, maybe encrypted through Enigma, but then maybe you'll have the option of selling some of your data, which they're already doing. People are already selling their health data. It's like the new plasma bank. So you can sell some of your data if you really need to. And then if you become a consumer brand, it's part of this digital branding, which if you think about how they were representing amply, oh, this child can build social capital. Well, you know, I don't really know what a fallen from grace former middle-class corporate suburbia person turned radical cyborg hunter. What kind of brand is that? You know, and there's a really good book called Feed by M.T. Anderson that's sort of this near future dystopia. And one of the heroines is a homeschooled girl who goes, like when she shops, she messes up all of, like picks up all sorts of random things so they can't profile her. And then eventually she falls ill and no one will invest in her because they don't know what she is. Like she has no identifiable brand. And so that's what blockchain will enable us if we understand, and I haven't even gotten into this, but this idea that capitalism is breaking through into the virtual world. Like capitalism, to expand in a world of finite resources, capitalism has to go into the virtual world and take over, and blockchain is what's allowing them to capture digital assets in the virtual world. And we're already being trained, like Class Dojo and all these classroom economies and avatars are training kids to live Minecraft.
Oh my God, Class Dojo. I've used that for my kids. I've been using that since my son was in 5th grade.
But like you can earn stuff. My understanding is like you can earn outfits for, that's all virtual capitalism. Like even when my kid was little, I didn't realize it, but they had Webkins, like where you buy a plush animal, but there's a code that unlocks a virtual world. And then you can like earn, you can go to the diamond mine, right? And earn points and buy things for your virtual animals. Like there's a whole culture built around that at the time. And it's virtual capitalism because it can't keep growing in real space. And there's still a cost. There's an environmental cost of energy, but it's not the same cost. And so blockchain is what allows that to happen. It allows for tracking digital assets in virtual worlds. And that is why, in many respects, there's a huge influence of the video game community. And the video gaming community is fundamentally coming off of military technology. And psyops and entertainment. It is, you know, and now it's going to be immersive with virtual reality and mixed reality. So like what is real? And then imagine if they're commodifying you as data, that you can almost have split personalities in virtual worlds, right? Like who are you on your social electronic presence at work versus who are you on different social media platforms? And some people represent themselves very differently in those spaces, and they could all be mined as commodities. Digital twinning, that's what the digital twins are for. That's another
digital twin. Yeah. All right. This is a lot. Yeah, you have to come back and like dig into that. Somebody pointed out that Andrew Yang has said that people should own and control their own data, and he's filing to run for mayor of New York. So, yeah, wow. Okay.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alison. Just like I said, you like a walking encyclopedia, like just reading all these World Economic Forum white papers and going to all these conferences where we were still going to conferences in person and learning about all this stuff so that we can get this out to our communities. Thank you so much. This is the longest episode that I've done. It's probably the most important episode that I've done as well. Thank you. And we will have you back in 2021 for sure to continue to talk about this because I'm sure this stuff is continuously ever evolving.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Alison. And Merry Christmas, everybody, to all who celebrate, and Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.